Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Kyubi attack. A decision was made by the council to train a young blonde in secret. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Tap 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 tap. That continuous tapping. Tap 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 tap. Did he really need just doing that? Tap 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 tap. Can't he just sit fucking still? Tap 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 tap. Shut the hell up with the damn tapping. It's driving me crazy. The man, his employer, looked back at him in shock. Sorry, I am just a little nervous. Of course he was nervous. He had every reason in the world to nervous. That still didn't mean that he could drive him crazy by tapping his fingers on his desk. The man he was guarding was known as Shinta. That's all his employer cared to tell him, and personally he didn't care anyway. Shinta was a short, balding little businessman. The one thing true about any businessman today was that they are corrupt, power-hungry little mongrels. And while he hated working for them, they pay well. Money is what was most important to Shinta, money and his own life. His life was better if he had more money, thus getting money any way he could made his life better. Whether it was from cheating people, threatening them, or just plain stealing, he didn't care. He had come to find that money was a great way to help live your life and save it at the same time. If it wasn't for money, he wouldn't be able to afford his small personal army, he wouldn't be able to live in his well-secured home, and he wouldn't be able to hire B-rank missing nin to be his personal guard. And that's why he was here. His name was Kusagi Kiro, an A-rank missing nin from the Cloud. Him and his brother Shuro had run away from Cloud 3 years ago when they stole the current Raikage's personal jutsu scroll. With it they both became two of the best lightning jutsu users in the world. They started as low C rank in the bingo books of the hidden villages, but quickly worked their way up to B rank through the jobs they took and ninja they killed. They were originally hired to kill Shinta by a man named Gatu. Apparently Gatu was in the same sort of business as Shinta but was operating in Wave Country at the moment. Eventually planning to expand his operations into the Fire Country, Gatu needed to get rid of Shinta. A gang war was the last thing either of the two really needed. The result of that would be messy and attract too much attention from the ninja in Konoha. So instead Gatu offered him a good amount of money to just assassinate Shinta. Would have worked too, had Shinta not offered more money to be his bodyguards. The offer was generous enough for them to shred their contract with Gatu and become Shinta's new top-rank bodyguards. Besides, he didn't really like the competition with Gatu's organization for jobs. He had another 2A rank nins on his side that he tended to favor. So now this is where he was, guarding this fidgety little man while his brother was off to check on the normal guards. He had to admit that he was impressed by the guards though. It had been no easy task for him and his brother to first sneak in, and now with them helping it had become even better. Today was different however, security was tighter today since they had some news he didn't want to hear. Apparently after the assassination attempt Gatu decided the best way to deal with Shinta would be to send another shinobi after them, but this time it wouldn't be some missing nin. He had managed to find some info on Shinta's dealings and sent the info anonymously to Konoha. So now a team from Konoha was likely to come if the info was bad enough. Luckily for Shinta they had a spy in Gatu Corps that had managed to get this info to him, or they would have been completely unprepared for whatever was coming. The only thing unsettling to him was why Shinta was so worried. Kiro knew that Shinta's dealings weren't legal, but still it couldn't be bad enough that he was so nervous one would think that the Hokage was going to come personally. The most likely thing coming for him would maybe be a small team of likely 3 chunin, at most a decent jonin. So what was there to worry about? They could easily handle a few chunin, and if a jonin did come, then he could likely fight him one-on-one with moderate difficulty. Then if things got bad his brother could step in. Really Shinta, you don't need to be so nervous. The small man jumped a little in his seat. He was nowhere near this nervous when we came after him. Kiro thought. I wouldn't worry so much. Even if what you spy told us is true, then the most likely thing they would send at you is a few chunin, or maybe a jonin depending on what kind of info they got. So don't worry, me and Shuro can easily handle some jonin, or a few chunin. To his surprise Shinta didn't calm down at all. If anything the man got even more nervous when he spoke about it depending on what kind of information Konoha got their hands on. What could Konoha have learned to make him this nervous? He was about to question it further until his brother opened the door and proceeded to talk in the office. His brother walked in with a bored look on his face, as if wondering why they ever took such a simple job. His brother was much more vicious than himself and would have likely killed Shinta for the joy of it, had Kiro not figured it a way of some easy income. Shuro just walked over to the couch lazily and sat down while propping his legs up on a small coffee table in front of him. So how do things look outside, Shuro? Kiro asked just for the sake of boredom. Just by seeing how Shuro was acting, Kiro could easily tell nothing was going on outside. Nothing. Nothing at all. Shuro let out a long sigh as he leaned his head back to look at the ceiling. Geez, I was hoping we could finally get some action. I'm starting to get really bored of this job, bro. I know what you mean. It was true, after all. This job really was starting to get boring. He had been working for Shinta for a few months now, and the closest thing he had come to a fight was threatening some of Shinta's clients into paying. While it was fun to intimidate some weaker people, it still gets boring after a while. Do we even really know if Konoha is sending anybody? Or could this be some joke Gato is pulling on us to make us look afraid? Kiro just shrugged his shoulders in response. He guessed it could be possible that the info was all false, but that didn't mean his employer was willing to risk his life by believing it wasn't. So he would still be stuck here with his brother. Even still, we should be prepared to escape. Kiro looked over at Shinta a little annoyed. Did he doubt their abilities or something? Or did he just expect something a little too tough for them to be able to handle? If that was true, then the info must have been incredibly bad, which he highly doubted. Still, it left him wondering. Shinta, just what did Konoha? Kiro was interrupted by the buzzing of the speakerphone on Shinta's desk. Kiro just looked at it annoyed, while Shinta nearly fell out of his seat when it went off. Yes? Shinta answered. Shinta, sir, this is Hiroshi at the front gate. The voice sounded a little panicky at whatever the reason he was calling for. Kiro and Shuro listened in carefully to the call, in case something important was going on. What's wrong? Well, sir, there is some guy walking towards the compound. So? Well, from what I can tell from a distance, he is a Konoha nin. Looking over at his brother, he watched as a big grin overtook Shuro's bored face. Same could be said about Kira himself. He had been waiting for a fight, and it looked like they sent some poor jonin to take care of the job. Now they would get some fun. Don't let him into the compound. Do you hear me? Shinta roared over the intercom. He was sweating nervously now in fear of what might be coming. Why, yes, sir. With the guard cut off the line. Ha! Finally, some action. Come on, bro, let's see if we can figure out who it is from the window. Shuro leapt off his seat on the sofa and bounded towards the window. Kiro shook his head softly at his brother's antics. He was a hell of a fighter and very intimidating, but he could get as giddy as a school child when anticipation of anything. Walking over to the window of the two-story building, he looked out towards the front gate. There were about 5 guards stationed there at the moment, each with various weapons and fighting techniques. As a ninja, they wouldn't be rated above genin, but there were talented plain fighters nonetheless. Looking down the road some to where the man the guard was talking about, however, he felt his jaw drop and eyes widen. It can't be, there's no way they would send him. He had gray spiky hair off to one side, his forehead protector covering his left eye, and a mask that covered the bottom half of his face. He was wearing the traditional clothing of a Konoha jonin, a green combat vest, dark blue pants and long-sleeve shirt, along with plated black gloves. That, and he was reading a little orange book. All the signs were there. Copy Ninja Kakashi. Who is that, bro? Shuro asked. While he may have been a skilled fighter, and a bloodthirsty one at that, he had never liked to research into other ninjas. In truth, it still surprised Kiro that his brother didn't know who Kakashi was. He would think that his brother would want to know the names of strong opponents for him to fight. That's Hatake Kakashi, also known as the famous copy ninja Kakashi. He is a high-ranked jonin from Konoha. It's said that he has copied over 1,000 different jutsus from the opponents he has fought. So he can use any jutsu for a situation. His forehead protector is covering the famous Sharingan eye. He stated in a mixed sense of awe and fear. Why the fuck would they send Hatake Kakashi? Kiro watched as Kakashi easily knocked out every guard that was running at him as he passed through the gate, not once taking his eyes off the book he was reading. The mission looked as if it was child's play to him. We gotta get out of here. Shinta, get up. We're leaving, Kiro announced. Before he could barely make a step towards the door, his brother was in front of him with a furious look in his eyes. What the fuck do you mean we're leaving? Shuro yelled in outrage. To his surprise, the response he got was a fist to jaw from his older brother. That is the famous copy nin out there. He is too much of a match for us. We are leaving while we can, Kiro stated hastily as he pulled his shocked brother up from the floor. Shinta was standing right behind Kiro as he started to make his way to the door. Opening it, he was shocked to see what was outside. Outside in the long hallway that led towards Shinta's office were dozens of guards unconscious. Every single one was completely disabled and either on the ground or against wall completely knocked out. This shocked the group because they never even heard the commotion of fighting while they were only in the next room. Kiro barely managed to dodge the kunai that came flying towards his face. At the last second he moved his head to the side and it grazed along his temple until it flew past him into the room, slamming in the opposite wall. At the end of the hall was an umbu in a black cloak. Kiro just barely caught a glimpse of the mask when he slammed the door and pressed his back to it, breathing heavily. Oh shit, there was no denying it. They were pretty much fucked. His brother was to the side after dodging the kunai. What the fuck? Shuro yelled out in surprise, looking at the kunai embedded in the wall by Shinta's desk. Turning around, he looked at the blood running down his brother's face. Kiro had only caught a glimpse of the mask the umbu wearing, but it was enough for him. He was wearing the kitsune mask. Only one person wore that mask. It's the demon of Konoha. Shuro looked at his brother in shock. What? Why would Konoha send him? Who? Turning and looking down, he noticed the confused expression on Shinta's face. Of course, the little man had never heard of the demon. His name wasn't well known outside of ninja. Looking down at the small man, Kiro realized that he should at least know of the person coming for him. According to rumor, 2 years ago, on the anniversary of the defeat of the Kyuubi by the Yondaime of Konoha, a brand new umbu was introduced to the ranks of Konoha. He was taken in well with the ninja there, but the villagers were a different case because he wore the mask of the kitsune. Kiro was reciting word for word what he knew about the man. A lot of info started spreading about him about a year and a half ago after the demon took out some rank missing nin. The underground went completely ballistic about the unknown shinobi and price was quickly put on his head. They told each other what little info they got on him from Konoha. He completed all of his missions efficiently and was known to have incredible power. He quickly became feared and respected in Konoha and earned his nickname from other countries' shinobi as the demon of Konoha because of the circumstances around his mask. By the time he was finished, Shinta looked ready to wet himself even though there was much he hadn't told him. The demon had always succeeded in his missions, and if he was here then it meant only one thing. He was here to likely kill Shinta. Well, it seems you know a lot about me. Kuri's gaze snapped over to the desk that Shinta occupied a few minutes ago. Sitting in the chair was the demon, and the kunai in the wall was gone. Shit. He was wearing the standard body armor of the Konoha umbu along with the cloak. His legs were propped up on top of the desk as he stretched back in the chair with one hand behind his head, and the other holding a small book in front of his face. Kiro and Shuro Kasagi. 2 B-rank missing nin. Wanted for theft of the Raikage's personal jutsu scrolls, murder of civilians, along with the murder of a number of shinobi. Both are well known for lightning jutsus they stole from the Raikage, but chakra capacity and taijutsu are supposed to be mediocre. Finishing the page, he decided it would be a good time to close his bingo book and place it back in his pocket. Though looking at you, I would say maybe mid to high C rank at best. What are you here for? Shuro exploded. Kiro almost smacked his brother on the backside of his head for asking such a stupid question. The demon only chuckled a little bit in response, and cocked his head to the side as if asking if he was serious. What could Shinta possibly have done to make Konoha pissed off enough to send you and the copy nin? Oh, we volunteered for this mission. No pay. What? Why would do something like that? Your little employer there made a deal with someone that caused us a great deal of pain. Kiros looked on in confusion. Who could Shinta have made a deal with to make them work without pay for revenge? This wasn't the kind of situation he wanted to end up in when he joined Shinta. His only chance was to somehow escape. Who? Orochimaru, he spoke with venom. Kiro's eyes widened in shock along with his brother's at the utterance of the name. The legendary trader of the leaf, Orochimaru, was the one they wanted. When the hell did Shinta make a deal with him? How could Shinta not tell him about meeting with the snake Sannin? Of course, Konoha would send them if Orochimaru was involved somehow. It looks like you two didn't know. Oh well, I still have a mission to complete, so get out of the way before I force you. Kiro knew his brother well and knew what was going to happen now. Shuro was trained to always focus on the mission, in this case protection Shinta. But worse than that was Shuro was easy to anger, and hated being told what to do. Before Kiro could get him to stop, Shuro leapt into action like the good mercenary he was. Immediately he reached into his pouch and hurled 3 kunai at the umbu who tried to stand up quickly. To Kiro's surprise, he watched as the 3 kunai pierced straight into the chest of the demon, and he slumped back into the chair. Kiro swallowed the lump in his throat nervously as he walked to check the body in disbelief. Let's get out of here. Kiro turned around to see his brother already in front of the door ready to escape with Shinta. Kiro was about to move also when he heard a small poof behind him. Turning around quickly, he noticed smoke where the body should have been. A bunch in that whole time? Kiro spun around quickly to look at his brother, standing in front of the door, who was wearing an equal expression of shock. Knock knock. Kiro watched in horror as his brother turned around to face the door. When Shuro turned around, there was instantly a blade coming through the door. Before he could react, the sword had pierced straight through Shuro's throat. Tears welled up in his eyes as Kiro watched his brother pull away from the blade and start to choke on his own blood. Kiro got a final look in his brother's frightened eyes before Shuro fell to the ground. His brother was dead. The door was kicked open and the Umbu walked in, calmly stepping over Shuro and facing Kiro. He looked at the corpse on the ground and then back at Kiro before he spoke. I didn't want to kill you too. I could have brought you in peacefully if he didn't attack. Normally I would give you the option to come peacefully, but I have a feeling that you would rather stay and seek revenge for your brother. Kiro knew he wouldn't be able to live with himself if he didn't at least try something against the killer of his brother. So solemnly he nodded his head in agreement to the demon's statement. Immediately Kiro started making seals the second after he nodded. Lightning started to gather in his palms as he slowly spread his arms out, causing the current of electricity to stretch. The Umbu watched curiously as the lightning continued to build up and glow between his palms. After his arms finished spreading out, he slowly brought them back in, straining against the power to condense the lightning till the light was almost blinding. Finally he couldn't hold it any longer and the lightning flew out horizontally like a slash in the air. Lightning lash. Kiro stared in wonder as he watched the Umbu pulled his hand out of the cloak. In his palm rested a swirling blue orb of chakra. He quickly slammed the orb of chakra into the lash of lightning in the air. Rasengan. The two attacks struggled for only a second before the lightning broke in half and flew by him harmlessly. Kiro just looked on in shock that one of his best attacks was just beaten. Still, the name of the attack nagged the back of his mind. How? While you may have been using your lightning element in that last attack, the Rasengan is a technique that uses pure chakra in its attack. Thus your element gains no advantage or disadvantage against my attack and it becomes a pure battle of strength. In this case I have more. He disappeared in a blur of movement. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Kiro heard spoken to the side of him before he felt the blade pierce through his throat. Shinta stood in shock at watching how quickly his two best men had been dispatched. He watched as the Umbu quickly wiped the blood clean from his blade and resheathed it before turning to Shinta himself. You. Shinta turned around quickly to make a break for it. When he turned around, he saw a man with a mask covering half of his face standing in front of him, his eye curved happily. He gave a slight wave to Shinta. Yo! Shinta fainted from the shock and nearly had a heart attack. Kakashi just scratched the back of his head while looking at the little man. The Umbu just chuckled at the antics of the Jonin as he took a scroll out of the pack that belonged to the missing nin. Afterwards he walked over to where Kakashi was sitting on top of Shinta while reading. You were late. Gomen. I was just. Save it for someone else. Kakashi's sweat dropped a little. So do you think he will know anything? Kakashi looked up with a serious expression in his eye at the question. Not likely, Orochimaru is too clever. But if he does know something, we will be the first to find out. Yeah, I guess so. Come on, let's get him out of here. He's got a date with Ibiki. The Umbu shuddered a little bit at what poor Shinta would be going through. Without another word, Kakashi grabbed Shinta and threw him over his shoulder before they jumped out the window. The demon just took one last look at the two bodies on the floor before jumping out of the window alongside of Kakashi. Kakashi was waiting for him at the front gate entrance. Around him were several unconscious bodies on the ground from when he first came in. You ready? A single nod was all the response was all Kakashi got before they took off for Konoha at a speed most could barely see. Kakashi observed the one next to him carefully. The normally very cheerful boy was being a little too quiet and thoughtful. Something must be bothering him. The Kakashi-senpai? Kakashi arched his eyebrow at the honorific of respect given. Normally he would just call him some kind of pervert to get his attention. Do you think the old man will let me get a team this time around? Is it that time already? This would be the age group that you would have graduated with, right? Hi. Well, I sort of doubt he would want you to teach people your own age. The Umbu's head dropped some, knowing Kakashi was likely right. Kakashi smirked a little bit before continuing. But most of the clan head's children are graduating in this group. Some of them might want you to teach. He might have been wearing a mask, but Kakashi could visibly see the changes in posture the Umbu had. His spirits were picked up some by the comment. Kakashi knew how much he wanted to be a Jonin sensei to follow the footsteps of his father. Thanks, Kakashi-senpai. You will do him proud, Naruto. 00000. Konoha Hokage Tower. Ah, finally. Hiruzen turned around slowly in his chair to face towards the window. It was late in the evening in Konoha, but the streets still looked busy with life. Sarutobi looked unhappily as he smoked from his pipe, his paperwork for the day finally finished. Things were going well in the village of the Leaves. The people were at peace and the village was in a state of prosperity. The villagers themselves were making good money for the village economy, through both trade and agriculture. Missions were plentiful and profitable. Still, though, he couldn't help but believe that the village would be doing better if the man he had chosen as his successor were still alive. Minato. No matter how many times he would tell himself that every day, it still didn't make him feel any better about what had happened. Minato just wouldn't let Hiruzen make the sacrifice. It was his job as the Hokage of Konoha, not the job of the former Hokage. He used his own son, knowing that it would be impossible for him to ask anyone else in the village for theirs. He sacrificed his life, and basically the life of his son, to lead a normal life, for the village to survive. The night the Kyuubi attack changed numerous opinions of how to hold and regard others. They also probably didn't realize just how much their decision had molded the future for Konoha. Flashback. The nicknamed god of shinobi was surprised. Well, maybe that wasn't the right word, shocked was more like it. Sarutobi Hiruzen had prepared himself mentally on his walk to the council chamber, prepared to explain what had happened and how the boy was to be treated as a hero. What he received both severely cut both his respect and trust in many people. We should kill him while we have the chance. They were calling for the death of a child. He had tried his best to explain the sacrifice and nature of the seal that now held the great demon, but they could not see past their own fear and hatred in the aftermath of such a traumatic event. Hiruzen knew that even now, as they sat in these chambers, that his ninja were still in the midst of operations. Fires still raged across the village, and the wounded were still being recovered from amongst the rubble. Many of the shinobi heads and civilian leaders present wore bandages stained with blood. This would leave a deep scar in the village's psyche that would take years to recover from. He is not the demon, just a child, Sarutobi argued. He sat in the center of the large half-circle table. To his sides were all the elders, and even the clan elders were here for this meeting. Directly in front of the group on a small pedestal sat a tiny basket where the newborn in question was sleeping. It can't be allowed to live after what it did. The third Hokage was having difficulty with them. The elders that were non-shinobi were very adamant about killing the child. He knew they feared what they didn't understand. His only hope seemed to be the few shinobi elders not incredibly willing to kill the child. Many of them showed the same signs as the others, but some of them were keeping a cool head about the situation. One was puzzling him, though. Hyuga Hayashi was normally one of the most vocal of persons in the council, but now he was remaining completely silent. Sarutobi knew that the man had been suffering a great deal. Hayashi and Minato were teammates, rivals, and best friends. The reason he was more puzzled, though, was Hayashi's thoughtful look at young Naruto. Not once had his eyes left the child's. He just kept staring as if waiting for something. I still don't see why we have reason to be afraid. Sarutobi smiled a little as he heard the response. Nara Shikaku was one of the most intelligent men he knew. The lazy Jonin and clan leader in question was currently leaning back in his chair with his arms behind the back of his head. He seemed almost bored with what was happening. What do you mean, Shikaku? What I said, he's just a child. What harm can he do? He is the demon. If we don't kill him while he's weak, we may never get another chance. You have yet to provide adequate proof that he is indeed the demon. Sarutobi looked at the new voice. Aburame's Shibi was one of the quietest people he had ever met, but when he spoke it was important. His clan prided themselves on their use of logic to solve situations in question. They were the ones that would always think things out before behaving irrationally. Perhaps he would be able to persuade the growing number. The seal is all the proof we need. That doesn't prove that he is indeed the demon. Still, think of the risk. There was a loud slap as a hand hit the table. Yamanka Inoichi was standing up now, looking furious at all the people in favor of killing the child. The clan head was young and brash, but that was exactly what was needed. This is bullshit. There is no way Minato would just seal the demon for us to kill an innocent child. You would put such blind faith in him. I would trust Minato with my life. The arguing just kept going. Neither side seemed to be making any leeway with the other group, but the group of normal elders was still larger than the group against killing him. It was looking like Hiruzen would have to put his foot down and make the decision without their consideration. It would cost him politically, but it would achieve Minato's wish. During this time, Sarutobi decided to pass the time as Hayashi was, watching the child. How they could want to kill the boy, he couldn't understand. Just looking at him, it was possible to tell he was innocent. Sarutobi just watched the child sleep restlessly. The act of the seal must have taken a lot out of him. Naruto opened his eyes for the first time for only a few seconds, not really seeing anything, before falling back asleep. Sarutobi smiled a little bit at the sight, but immediately panicked when he saw Hayashi had risen and walked over to the basket. "Hayashi, what are you doing?" Sarutobi yelled out, worried for the child's sake. Could Hayashi possibly want revenge for his friend's life? To his relief, Hayashi only stood in front of the baby. "Do it, Hayashi! Kill it, Hayashi! He is the reason Minato is dead!" The previous Hokage prepared to move quickly as he saw Hayashi's hand start to move towards the basket, but instead he hesitated after looking at Hayashi's speed. Hayashi's hand was not moving with the speed and confidence of a strike that could kill. His hand was slow and shaking as it reached for the boy. The whole room sat in silent shock as Hayashi gently ran his fingers through the newborn's blonde hair. "Tell me, Hokage-sama," Hayashi spoke softly. "What of Kushina?" The Sarutobi frowned softly as he knew that Hayashi had figured it out. He was waiting to see Naruto's eyes to confirm his suspicions. "She did not survive," Hiruzen spoke sadly. This was not what Sarutobi was hoping for. If Naruto's lineage was to be revealed, it would create so many problems for his future. The Namikaze and Uzumaki name would bring forth an immeasurable amount of danger to the child from outside the village and could create a power struggle within Konoha. "I will care for him." The Haijia's announcement had mixed reactions around the room. Outrage, shock, and anger were present in the face of most, but the Sarutobi could see some curious and contemplative looks from shinobi clan leaders. Loud debate rung out in the hall. "Stop with this nonsense," the deep, gravelly voice drew Sarutobi's ire as the scarred and bandage-faced Danzo rose from his seat. "The Jinchuriki is a weapon, and he should be used as such." "No!" Hiruzen yelled. Standing up so quickly the chair behind him fell with a clatter. "The other villages already have this power, Sarutobi," Danzo challenged. "We have an opportunity to turn the most powerful of the tailed beasts into our weapon." "Minato's son will not become a weapon." Hiruzen wasn't sure whether he wanted to thank Hayashi or strangle him for letting the fox out of the bag, so to speak. Many of the other councilmen sat in a stunned silence around the circle. The shinobi understanding exactly the sacrifice made and the civilians trying to comprehend the situation. How? Hayashi glared at the councilman. "Do you really think so little of Minato that he would take just any child to put this burden on?" The councilman in question shrank a little in his chair and started to find the surface of the table very interesting. "I still don't see the issue. He should be killed even if he is Minato's son." Sarutobi didn't even bother to spare Fugaku Uchiha a glance. He didn't like anything about the man. What was there to like behind all the arrogance he put up? The man was even colder and more arrogant than any Haijie he had ever met. The head of the Uchiha clan had shown through the discussions already that he was all for killing the child. "How can you say something like that? Do you really think Minato would do this to kill his own son?" Inoichi retorted. Arguing continued back and forth while Hiruzen just sat with his fingers massaging his temple. He had a feeling an argument would break out between the Haijie and Uchiha clans because of their past, but he had been pleasantly surprised when all Hayashi did was stand guard at young Naruto's crib. The situation wasn't turning out at all how he had hoped. Some wounds just can't heal easily for those that have been hurt. "We should train him." Hayashi's stoic voice once again cut through. "What? Why?" "If we were to train the boy to use the immense amount of power he contains, he could become a pillar of our village." "So, you want to use your own best friend's son as a tool?" Fugaku's remarked snidely with a smirk at the Haijie. "I said no such thing. In fact, I say we teach him to follow in his father's footsteps. Perhaps one day, if he chooses, he may have the qualities to take up his father's mantle as Hokage." "And who would train him, you? How do we know that you don't want to just turn him into your own little pawn?" Hayashi's face never changed at the comment, but Hayashi could see the anger in his eyes. The Haijie was withstanding insult after insult from the Uchiha in hopes of saving the young child's life. It wasn't an easy thing for any Haijie to take an insult laying down. "Then why not have him train with each of the clan heads?" Shikaku Nara spoke out. "I mean, if you're so worried about him becoming a Haijie tool, just have all of the clans train him in some way." "How so?" "I don't know. The Haijie could teach him chakra control and about his father. Akimichi could teach strength, Nara strategy, blah blah, you get the deal." Shikaku waved his hand in the air in an uncaring manner, as he listed off different ways to train the boy. All the ninja clans were agreeing with the proposal except for Fugaku, who absolutely refused to train him, and some of the civilians were beginning to be swayed to their way. It didn't take much more debating before the decision was final that he would be taught by the clans. He would be watched closely by all involved for any negative signs, but he would be taught in secret. Very well then. This is going to be a S-class secret. No one is to know about this outside this room, and if word does get out, Sarutobi warned as he eyed those that disagreed. Expect your life to be forfeit. Flashback over. Hiruzen sighed as he puffed on his pipe. That had been 12 years ago, and Naruto had already surpassed everyone's expectations. He had become an Anbu by age 10 under their tutelage, and by 12 he had already had a reputation starting to be known across the world. But he wasn't the tool most had expected him to become. In almost every way he was turning out just like his parents. They had the same attitude about life, same hopes, same morals. Hayashi had done his best to teach him all about his parents, and it seemed to have worked. He understood that the village needed him, and that he could be their best hope for the future. And now he had just received his third request of the night from a clan head to have Naruto lead their child as a Jonin sensei. He knew Naruto wanted to desperately become one to follow in the footsteps of his father. However, there could be innumerable complications with him teaching a group his own age. They might not respect him, they might not even want to listen to him. Naruto was strong enough to become one, of course, but that didn't mean he was ready for it. Sensei held a lot of responsibility for their teams. The senseis judged when they would take risks and protected their students from risks too great to handle. And the possible pain of losing a student could tear apart a person with as big a heart as Naruto. Sarutobi let out another puff of his pipe as he lost himself in thought. Knock knock. It's open. In walked Hyuga Hayashi with a small smile at seeing his old friend. Sarutobi stood up immediately and met Hayashi halfway with a firm handshake before leading him to one of the chairs before his desk. So, what brings you here, Hayashi? Well, Hokage-sama, I have a request if you wouldn't mind. The sound of 2 pairs of feet lightly patted the ground as they walked along the path through the forest. To most people it would seem a little strange to watch 2 shinobi walk down the road so calmly. But if you happened to live near an area under protection of a hidden village, then it wasn't at all strange to see shinobi on their way to and from missions. One was dressed in the standard clothing that one knew was standard of the Konoha's Jonin rank, the only standout thing about him being his lopsided hair and the headband across his left eye. The strange thing was the small unconscious man draped over his shoulder left should, and in his right hand a small orange book in front of his face. Next to him walked a figure draped with a beige cloak that covered his entire body. His height was much shorter than the older man walking next to him, only reaching up to his chest level. The only part of him showing was the red and white fox mask that shone clearly to anyone observing. His posture was bored as you could see his slumped shoulders and his feet dragging as he walked along. So when do I get to carry him? The cloaked Umbu whined as he walked alongside the famous copy ninja. You don't. Remember what happened last time you carried a prisoner? The cycloptic ninja replied in a bored tone. Hey! That wasn't my fault. The bastard bit me when he woke up. The Umbu yelled defensively at the Jonin. You put him in the hospital for 2 weeks before he was well enough to even see a Biki. Kakashi drawled out as his one eye looked over at the Umbu beside him. Plus Hokage-sama said you are not allowed? What? When did he tell you that? The Umbu yelled at the copy ninja. The copy ninja paid no mind to the complaining, and just kept walking down the road. Are you listening to me? The gate is in sight, was the only response that he was greeted with, and immediately any thought of retort vanished. Kakashi sighed as he shifted the weight of the chubby little man on his shoulder to gain some more comfort, and to observe his friend better. He could see the rigidness in his steps as he walked alongside Kakashi and noticed the stiffness of his shoulders and back. Relax, Naruto. No reason to get so worked up about walking into the village. Says the person not hated by nearly the entire population. Naruto quickly retorted, though his posture did visibly relax somewhat. I can barely get through the gates without receiving a hateful glare. He paused as they noticed a few merchants from the village exit the gate along the road. An older man sent a glare of hate directly at him. At the same time, some of the others looked at him fearfully. When they had finally passed by, Naruto threw his hands into the air in frustration. I can't even get into the gates without receiving a glare. Meanwhile, Kakashi just looked a little sheepish as the two walked through the gates. I understand your reasoning, Hayashi, but that does not mean I agree with it. The elderly Hokage let out a long sigh as he reached into his desk for some more tobacco for his pipe. With careful precision, he pulled out the proper amount for himself. Not only that, but I am not sure he is ready to lead a team of genin, much less a group his own age. You can't deny that he has the ability to lead a squad. He has already led a number of missions during his time with the Umbu. Hayashi countered quickly as he watches man across from him take the time to light his pipe. Umbu Hayashi, he led Umbu. He took a moment to breath in a long drag from the pipe and release. They are already well trained and know about the chain of command and obeying your superiors. These are children we're talking about it. Respect will not come so easily, and it could cause trouble. If he is placed with a team that would cause conflict. Hayashi responded quickly. You know that there are a number of students in this year's graduating class that would suit to a new Jonin sensei quite easily. Hayashi responded before taking a sip of the tea that Hiruzen's secretary had provided for him before the meeting. My daughter, for example. Sarutobi arched an eyebrow slightly at the Hyuga leader. I have already had a number of requests from the other clan leaders on this same subject, Hayashi. You wouldn't happen to have had a hand in that too, would you? A small smirk appeared on the corner of Hayashi's lips as he took another sip of the tea in front of him. It would hardly be fair of me to place your daughter on a team led by him, when I have already received so many requests from other influential members of our village for his services. If Hayashi wanted to play dirty, then so would he. I am not one for favoritism, even if it is for Naruto. Hayashi was silent for a few moments, telling Hiruzen that he had won a small victory there. It was only to be short-lived, however, as he could tell Hayashi had formed another counter-argument. Perhaps we can do something for him that hasn't been done in a while? Hayashi knew he had his attention at the raised eyebrow from the Hokage. Why don't we allow Naruto to pick the teams? He could pick the team he would feel best to lead, and it could even prove to be a useful training tool for when he will have to pick teams in the future when he takes over. If you disagree with any of his choices, you could of course make your own changes. It would be interesting to see how he arranges the teams. The Hokage had to admit as he scratched his chin. And it would give me more time to catch up on all the paperwork I am behind on. But I am still not sure this is a good idea. Many of those that have helped me train Minato's son simply feel the same way, Hokage-sama. His tea finished, he placed the small cup on the desk in front of him as he poured himself some more. Is it really so bad an idea to have him teach a team? Surely keeping him in the Umbu for a number of years will start to affect his mental state. If I had it my way, Hayashi, he would be living a normal life, and in this graduating class. The Hokage said pointedly before his face relaxed. You could see how hard of a toll being Hokage was taking on the elderly man in front of him. Not for the first time, both occupants in the room found themselves wishing that Minato was still here. Fine. I'll agree to let him have a team of genin, but if things don't go well, then he will lose his team, Hayashi. Hayashi rose from his chair and bowed deeply. Thank you, Hokage-sama. I would like to give the news to him personally and explain to him his duties, if that is all right, of course. At the Sarutobi's nod, Hayashi smiled slightly and turned around to leave. There will be many rules he will have to obey, Hayashi, such as his identity. Tell him to come by in the morning and I will have the files needed for him along with the restrictions he will be given. Hayashi once again turned around and nodded before his superior before walking to the door. He didn't make it halfway before yelling could be heard outside. You can't go in there. Hokage-sama is in a meeting. Suddenly the doors in front of Hayashi flew apart as they were kicked open with force, and there stood the subject of their very debate with a sheepish-looking Kakashi standing right behind him holding a tiny little man over his shoulder. Mission accomplished, Aji-san. When cannon and crap. Naruto's shoulders slumped as he saw Hayashi standing in the room staring at him. His head looked down towards the ground as he muttered out. How many do I have to do? 5 katas for ignoring the secretary, 5 for interrupting a meeting, 5 for kicking in the door, and another 5 for not showing the proper respect. All on top of your normal training, of course. Hayashi couldn't help but smirk slightly as he saw Naruto groan. You will come for training directly after you're debriefed. Hi, Hayashi-sensei. Naruto muttered rather unenthusiastically as Hayashi walked past him and out the doors. Naruto sent a small glare at the chuckling Hokage before sitting in the chair across from him with a flop. Kakashi handed off the prisoner to the Umbu assigned at the door to take him to interrogation. So, tell me about your mission, Naruto-kun. Sarutobi spoke softly as he leaned back in his chair prepared to hear the likely short debriefing from the hyper young man. Man, how was I supposed to know Hayashi-sensei would be there? Naruto muttered as he walked out of the Hokage tower. Next to him Kakashi walked with his Ika book in hand, simply nodding at Naruto's mumbling. I mean, it's gonna take me all night to finish those. I won't even have a chance to go and get any Ichiraku before they close up. It should be a crime to keep someone from Ichiraku. As the two reached the gate, they immediately leapt up towards the nearest building and off towards the Hyuga Manor. I don't believe that everyone holds the same philosophy towards ramen that you hold, Naruto. Naruto only leapt onward and threw his arms up into the air. Well, they should. Kakashi chucked next to him as he stared to veer away. Have fun training. Kakashi smiled as he leapt away. Pay my respects for me at the memorial, Kakashi-senpai. Naruto shouted before they were too far apart, and received a wave in response as Kakashi leapt off. Naruto's happy mood seemed to dissipate with Kakashi's departure, and was instead replaced with a rather solemn mood as he made his way across the village. Different thoughts racing through his head as he neared the Hyuga district. Would he maybe get a team this year? Or would he have to wait yet again? What kind of team would he get? All these different things running through his head as he landed softly in front of a tree at the edge of the Hyuga district. Man has responsibility, not power, he spoke quickly and quietly with his palm on the center of the tree and his eyes closed. He felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up and the feeling of being dipped in ice water run up his body before it vanished all at once, and he opened his eyes. Man, I hate that his eyes adjusted quickly to the little light the narrow tunnel ahead of him provided. Small lanterns lined the narrow path ahead of him, casting a soft orange glow down the generations-old tunnel. Naruto had long ago mapped out that the path took him directly under the many different homes inside the Hyuga district, even going as far as to pass directly under guard barracks, before it slowly started to incline as it neared the center of district. As he reached the end of the incline, he was greeted by a sliding shoji door with the soft glow of candles illuminating the paper and the framing. Carefully he opened the door and stepped inside. Shutting the door behind him, it seemed to disappear into the wall. The inside of Hayashi's study never ceased at impressing Naruto with its traditional elegance. Elegant calligraphy and different pieces of art lined the walls, along with the artwork stitched into the shoji doors themselves along the walls. The sitting table was stained a deep mahogany that Naruto could easily see his reflection on. Hayashi himself sat on one of the carefully designed pillows at his desk as he looked over several scrolls. How many times must I tell you not to enter this place with that mask on? He looked up from his work and sternly stared at Naruto. When you are here, you are my student and my friend. I will not have you cover up who you are. Naruto chuckled a little as he removed the mask covering his face. If that's true, then why am I not allowed to walk around the rest of the compound with it off? Beneath the mask, the tan face with 3 whisker marks on each cheek that Hayashi knew well. Bright blue eyes, the same eyes his father had possessed, stared back into his light lavender ones. His bright golden locks fell covering his forehead, just another thing he had in common with his father. The one thing Hayashi knew was different about the son of his former friend was the shape of his face, though. Minato's had been more slender while Naruto's was slightly rounder, a trait Naruto took from his mother. Though Hayashi could imagine that Naruto's face would have been even rounder had he not implemented a strict diet after seeing Naruto's habit of eating ramen was far greater than even Kushina's had been. At first Naruto had been completely against the diet, until Hayashi had said 2 magic words. Grow taller. Immediately after that, Naruto had agreed to change his diet from ramen and other junk foods to a healthy balance. He was allowed to have 1 bowl of ramen a day during the week and 2 on the weekends to compensate for agreeing to change his diet, however. A few months later, and the changes were obviously taking effect as Naruto had grown at a faster rate of the past 3 months than he had before, and his overall health had greatly improved. Hayashi had assumed he would be at least several inches shorter had the diet not changed so many years ago. Because your identity and your training here is to be considered a secret, as such you are only allowed to have you mask off while in my study or my private dojo. But while you're in those places and in my presence alone, you will have that mask off. Naruto rolled his eyes as he walked over to sit down in front of Hayashi. Yeah, I've heard you say that same thing 100 times. He muttered out as he flopped down on one of the pillows at the table. I give the same answer to the same question. It is you that looks foolish when I have to repeat the same answer to the same question 100 times. Hayashi said as he rolled up the scrolls in front of them and placed them to the side. We have something important to talk about, Naruto. Naruto immediately raised his hands in defense. Hey, if this is about me kicking in the door. I convinced Hokage-sama to allow you to get a genin team this year. The reaction was immediate as Naruto's jaw nearly hit the ground in surprise and his eyes went as wide as saucers. No way. Really? I get my own team to lead? Yes. Naruto yelled out as he jumped about in celebration. Hayashi was shaking his head slightly as he looked at Naruto. What have I taught you about self-control, Naruto? You're lucky this room has seals on it prevent people from listening in on us, or half the clan would be wondering who was inside of my study. Naruto just collapsed into a sitting position in the middle of the floor. I know, but I was just so excited. Who do I get to teach? Well, actually that is something we need to talk about. Hayashi motioned for Naruto to move closer to him and take his seat at the pillow again. Hokage-sama is going to allow you to pick the teams this year. Naruto's face took on a slightly puzzled but excited expression at the news. But isn't that his job? I thought that was one of the duties he had to fulfill as Hokage. To balance out the team's strengths. Normally yes, but I argued that this would be a good training exercise for you. After all, you will need to pick the teams out fairly yourself once you become the Hokage in the future. In addition, you will need to pick out a fair and balanced team that will be able to accept you as their sensei. So no Uchihas? Naruto questioned with a smirk. To that Hiashi grinned some, and shook his head to say no. Damn, I would have loved to mess with him. Though Kakashi-senpai will probably be assigned to teach him, seeing as he has a Sharingan. Uchiha Sasuke is also the current top student this year. If that persists, then Kakashi will receive the student with the highest scores and the student with the lowest according to tradition. Hiashi noted. Hokage-sama has all the information that you will need to start organizing the teams. He would like you to report to him first thing tomorrow morning to pick up everything you will need and to give you your rules regarding your team. Rules? Naruto's head cocked to side and thought. Like keeping them safe and teamwork and stuff? I know all of that. More likely it has to do with not revealing your identity until we know this is going to work out. Naruto was about to protest, but Hiashi quickly beat him to it by raising his hand. We are still not sure that you are ready yet, Naruto. Hokage-sama is only giving you this team under the condition that if you don't meet his satisfaction that he can give it to another sensei. But that's not fair. I have been leading Umbu teams for the past 2 years now. No one else has that kind of stipulation and pressure to deal with. Naruto fumed, outrage clearly written across his face towards Hiashi's neutral one. No other sensei are the same age as their students either. Commonly it's at least 3 to 5 years above the age group depending on the person up for sensei. Even your father was in that range before he took on a team. It was a dirty tactic, but Hiashi knew mentioning Minato would be the best way to get through to Naruto. He knew it had worked when Naruto crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked off to the side with a sour look on his face. It's not like I don't understand, it's unusual. I just want to do it. Naruto muttered out. And I believe you. It is your next step. No, it's not just that, Naruto spoke quickly, interrupting Hiashi. Embarrassed, he ducked his head down some and wouldn't make eye contact. I really just want the chance to interact with them too, to make friends with my students. A soft look overcame Hayashi's face, and he let out a sad sigh as he looked at the young man in front of him. The boy was so full of life and energy that he was only allowed to express through training and his time with clan heads. No friends his own age, just older people he knew in Umbu, and no playtime for just him. He had been training to be the best since the day he was born, training to surpass the strength of those before him. He was eternally thankful that the lessons on his parents had kept his spirit up, and his heart still kind. You have lived a life I know your father would have hated, Naruto. Naruto had shot up in shock and he looked wide-eyed Hiashi. I often wonder if he will ever forgive me for what I have done to you. He would have wanted you to grow up with him, training you, watching you play in the park with our children, and celebrating with you after graduating from the academy in a few days. Instead, I have robbed you of your childhood, instead making you into a weapon for Konoha. Naruto had never seen so much emotion on Hayashi's face, or so much pain in his voice. He smiled gently at Hiashi. I know you did what you thought would save my life, and I know my father would forgive you for just that reason. The two just sat there for a moment, lost in their own thoughts about how different things could have been. It wasn't for a few minutes until Naruto remembered something. Oh, I almost forgot. Naruto announced loudly with a smile as he reached into his pack and presented a scroll to Hiashi. Hayashi's eyebrows furrowed at the scroll being handed over to him. What is this? It's one of the Raikage's personal jutsu scroll. Hiashi nearly fumbled the object in his hands before gripping tightly with both hands as he looked at Naruto wide-eyed. How did you get your hands on this? And why give it to me? Naruto scratched the back of his head with a sheepish smile as he looked at Hiashi. Well, I sort of had to take care of these two brothers that were missing Nin from Cloud. Turns out they stole the Raikage scroll and they just happened to be guarding the guy I was on the mission for. So why give it to me? Hiashi asked with a raised eyebrow. Well, me and the old man thought that it would be too risky to keep it in the Hokage Tower, since if some spy managed to find it there and word got back to Cloud, it could cause one hell of a ruckus. So, I thought that maybe you would be able to take care of it, that, and with Cloud and your brother and all, I thought it might make you feel a little better. Naruto trailed off somewhat at the end, not exactly sure how to get what he was saying across to Hiashi. Hiashi simply smirked slightly in understanding as he looked at the treasured scroll in his hands. I understand, Naruto. Thank you very much. As he said this, he stood up and walked towards one of the calligraphy paintings on the wall. Naruto couldn't see what happened since Hayashi's back was to him, but next thing he knew there was a flash of light, and when Hiashi turned around the scroll was gone. Now I think you should get to those kata, if you don't want to be too tired for your team building plans tomorrow. Hiashi had to smile at Naruto's groan as the young man walked into the dojo linked to his study. She felt her body hit the wall of the building she had just been walking next to roughly as a few young boys ran through the streets, not caring if they bumped into someone. She felt several sting on her arm from where earlier training bruises along her body protested the rough treatment they had just suffered. For her part, all Hinata did was look at the retreating forms down the street as she grasped her arm slightly through her jacket before continuing her way towards the academy. She was tired and sore all over her body. Ever since a few years ago, when she had entered the academy, the clan council had decided that her training regimen needed to be stepped up. Elder Hisao had been assigned as her teacher during these sessions at home. He had not been lenient with her at all. Often she walked away from her sparring sessions bruised, battered, and barely feeling as if she had learned anything at all. Is this how the daughter of Hyuga Hayashi should act? The elder's words always stayed with her longer than her bruises would. His training was harsh, but his demeaning words had always struck her harder than his blows. She told herself over and over that he was berating her to make her want to try harder and learn more, but lately she was starting to feel that she would never be able to get it. The sudden ringing of a bell in front of her startled her out of her thoughts, as she realized she had made it to the academy, and one of the early bells had gone off. Hurriedly she made her way through the doors as other students rushed in with her. It didn't take her long to reach the classroom and see that she was one of the first few to get into the classroom. "Good morning, Hinata-chan." Hinata smiled and bowed quickly to the chunin standing at the desk in front of the classroom. "Good morning, Irika-sensei." Irika grinned as he looked at the child in front of him and scratched the back of his head, looking slightly sheepish. "How many times have I told you that I don't need you to bow to me like that? I'd hoped you would have grown out of doing that to me as we came to know each other over the years." Hinata blushed slightly in embarrassment in front of the teacher. "Jigomen, Irika-sensei." "Now none of that, Hinata." Irika spoke as he placed his hand on the girl's shoulder. "You do what you're comfortable with, okay?" At the girl's nod, the teacher smiled at her before lightly pushing her in the direction of the desks. "Now go find your seat before everyone piles in at the last moment." She briskly climbed her way to the back row of the classroom and sat down at her desk in the corner away from everyone. The only other students in the room being the quiet Aburame mare that sat further down the row from her, and the brooding Uchiha a few rows down from her. It was only quiet for a few more minutes though as the final bell for classes rang and students began pouring into the classroom and claiming their seats. She mildly watched the small argument that broke out between two gears she had come to know as Sakura Haruno and Ino Yamenka about who got to sit next to their crush Sasuke. It might have looked more entertaining to her had she not seen the same act every morning for several years now. No, now it was just a normal thing to the class every morning that ended with neither of them sitting next to the boy. Now, as you all know, tomorrow will be the day you students take the exam to become genins. That being the case, we decided that today would be a good day to review several skills to help prepare you for tomorrow's examination. First, we will start with a review of in-class material, and then after lunch we will do some practice outside. Irika spoke out before starting a lecture on chakra. Hinata felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up, and she tensed a little as she thought she felt a presence behind her for a moment before it was gone. Glancing behind her quickly, she let out a relieved breath as she confirmed that no one was there and turned her head back to pay attention to the lesson. Naruto had to admit he was lucky today was not windy at all, or he would probably be chasing all the papers spread out around him right now. He sat alone on the rooftop of the school with all the files that the old man had given him spread out around him as he observed the students during their lunch break and made notes on their files. All the while he kept a large notepad out directly in front of him, writing down the different ideas of his. If he really wanted this to work, he would have to make a team that would suit him and be able to get along with him, but not take anything away from the other squads. The old man had been very specific about him not telling his team his last name, or revealing his face to them. It was obvious that the old Hokage was quite nervous about doing this at all. If that's the case, then I will just have to make the best damn team ever. Oh, that won't be an easy task, you know. The voice of Kakashi spoke up behind Naruto, causing him to jump slightly. You were quite engrossed in your work for me to be able to sneak up on you like that. Naruto glared slightly at the man before turning back to his work. What do you mean? Oh well, to be the best damn team ever, won't they have to be better than the legendary 3? Kakashi stated as he glanced to the side to gauge Naruto's reaction to the question. Hell yeah! My team will defiantly be good enough to become the next legendary 3. Naruto announced with his fist raised into the air. Kakashi could only chuckle as he peered at the papers and students' stories below. So, which am I getting? And who interests you? Kakashi as he pulled out his Ika to read as he listened to Naruto's analysis. He could hear Naruto jump up excitedly as he gathered up some of the papers and stood up next to Kakashi to get a better view. Well, since the council would pitch a fit if I didn't, you are getting the Uchiha for starters. Naruto said as he pointed to said boy eating his lunch alone with a group of girls sitting a few feet away eyeing him. Whole last 2 Sharingan users left in Konoha and all, but overall from what I have observed today the only thing higher than his grades would be the stick shoved up his ass. Good luck with Sasuke's attitude, especially since he's probably getting one of his fangirls on his team. Are you trying to make my job difficult, Naruto? Kakashi asked with an annoyed sigh. If they fail, I'm going to have to put up with a long chat with the council. Naruto laughed out loud at that. Yeah, I really can't wait to listen to that one. Kakashi sent a look at Naruto that made Naruto somber slightly, but still chuckling. Not my fault if the Uchiha is arrogant. He's not his father, you know. Naruto let out a long sigh at the comment because of course Kakashi was right. Sasuke didn't deserve to be judged before for the action of his now deceased family, but Naruto had a hard time accepting that he may not have been alive if not for the intervention of Hiashi he could have died. When Naruto was 8, he questioned Hiashi and the other clan heads on how he had been put into the situation he was in. Each one had explained the council meeting to him from their own perspective. It had been an eye-opening experience for the young, sheltered, blonde to learn about the fear and hatred that was directed at him. One of the things that stuck with him the most, however, was how the Uchiha were the only major shinobi family to push for his death. Anyway, who's the girl you are going to stick me with? Following Naruto's pointing finger, Kakashi's eyes landed on the girl with pink hair. Pinky? Possibly. Haruno Sakura, probably his biggest fangirl and the highest rating kunoichi brain-wise, not physically however. Don't know what's up with the pink hair though, Naruto said, trailing off at the end. Though really it's still a toss-up between her and Ino Yamenka. You are thinking of breaking up the Ino Shikacho team? Their fathers won't be happy about that. Just because the father worked really well together, doesn't necessarily mean the children will. I saw firsthand today just how annoying Shikamaru considers Ino to be. Naruto spoke, remembering the nearly 20 different times Shikamaru called her troublesome before lunchtime. Kakashi just scratched his chin and nodded in understanding after hearing the reasoning. So, who is the final one since Sasuke is top of the class? Well, it's that kid over there. Naruto nodded his head in the direction of a boy as he shuffled through the papers in his hand looking for the boy's file. Suzuki Hitoshi. Naruto didn't notice Kakashi's eyebrows crease and thought at the mention of the name. According to this, he skipped ahead a year at the academy, but it might have been too early since he has the lowest grades in the class. I would guess if stuck with his original class he could have graduated at the top in a year. The boy, Kakashi could see, was the only one spending his lunch hour reading over the textbooks for the class. Hitoshi was tall for his age, matching the height of many of his seniors in the class, but not the tallest by any means. His shaggy hair was a light brown color sitting and his eyes, from what Kakashi could tell, were a light hazel. His skin was a light tan, probably from training in the sun, and from what Kakashi's eye could tell his muscles looked well-toned. He's been training. Looks like he works hard, Kakashi commented. You could say that. I noticed earlier when I was in the classroom scoping them out that his hands are really calloused. He either does a lot of construction work with tools, or he trains with a weapon. Suddenly Kakashi's eye widened in recognition as he realized who the child was. Ah, so that's where I knew his name from. What? Kakashi sighed sadly as he thought back to the memory. His father was Suzuki Hideki. He was an Umbu captain like us. Died about 3 years ago, before you joined the Umbu. What happened to him? Naruto's interest caught by Kakashi's comment. He went on an assassination mission to kill a big-time weapons dealer. We aren't sure exactly what happened after that. A hunter went looking for him and found his body in a field full of craters. After he retrieved his body, they found out snake venom killed him. Naruto's eyes narrowed immediately as he knew the answer. Orochimaru? Kakashi nodded. Yeah, looks like Orochimaru was visiting the weapon dealer. After Hideki finished his job, he was caught on the way back to Konoha. He was a master user of the bow staff. He might have been passing his skill on to Hitoshi during his off time with his son. Might be why his hands are calloused, and why he is trying too hard to skip ahead and graduate. He wants to find out what happened to his dad and get revenge, huh? Kakashi nodded at Naruto's question. They stood in silence for a while longer before Kakashi coughed into his hand to break it. So who do you plan to have for your team? A large grin spread across Naruto's face as he stuffed the folder into his cloak. You're gonna have to wait till tomorrow night like everyone else. Naruto spoke happily before he vanished in a plume of smoke and leaves, leaving Kakashi blinking in surprise. So are you worried about tomorrow, Shikamaru? Shikamaru yawned loudly as he glanced at Choji from his laid-back position on the ground. His friend sitting against the tree Shikamaru was using for shade as he lay down on the soft grass. He could see Choji pulling out a bag of some of flavor chips, Shikamaru didn't particularly care which kind and began munching on them quickly. Nah. Why worry about something so troublesome? Well, it could determine our entire future. Choji spoke as he bit into a particularly crunchy chip. We are going to pass tomorrow, Choji. Don't worry about it so much, you're gonna give yourself an ulcer. Shikamaru said as he rolled onto his side to close his eyes. Shikamaru, do you think we are going to be on a team together? Choji asked his best friend softly. Shikamaru sighed loudly before sitting up and staring at his best friend with a lazy look. Since we are good friends and since our fathers work so well together, it's pretty likely that the team is going to be me, you, and the blonde banshee. Choji nodded in relief as Shikamaru just confirmed his hopes. That's good. I wouldn't want to be on a team without you. Though Ino can be annoying at times. Shikamaru rubbed 2 fingers against his temple. Just the thought of being on a team with her is giving me a headache. She's not that bad. At Shikamaru's look, Choji knew he was just kidding himself, trying to convince Shikamaru differently. Who's not that bad? A loud voice came from behind Shikamaru, causing him to audibly groan as Ino walked up behind him. What do you want, Ino? Shikamaru asked the girl as she crossed her arms and looked down at him. What? Can't I come talk with childhood friends? The disbelieving looks the two sent her their answers. Fine. I just came to find out if you knew anything about the meeting our fathers are going to tonight. I heard Daddy say something about it being about the new teams this year. My father didn't get back from a mission until late last night, so I didn't hear anything from him. How about you, Choji? My father didn't mention anything about the teams. Choji responded with a quick shake of his head. Did you need anything else, Ino? You are standing in my view. For her part, Ino looked annoyed. Don't you think you should be treating me better? After all, Daddy said it was likely the 3 of us are going to be on the same team, though I would prefer to be on a team with Sasuke-kun. She trailed off at the end with hearts in her eyes. So do we. Shikamaru muttered under his breath. A sharp strike to the back of his head told him didn't do it quietly enough. Ouch, woman. Don't just go hitting people. I heard what you said, lazy bastard. As she started smacking him across the back of the head. All I wanted to know was if you heard what the team's makeup was going to be. Choji was about to step in to intervene the two when the bell for the end of the lunch period rang, interrupting Ino. She just huffed and walked off with her fists clenched back towards the building. Damn woman. Shikamaru muttered. Choji helped him stand up before they started their walk back to the academy. Maybe she won't be on our team? Choji commented helplessly, to which Shikamaru could only sigh. Hiruzen could feel a large headache coming on as he had to take a long drag of his pipe as he looked at the large group of people inside of the council's meeting chamber. It seemed that there were many people interested in this year's graduating class, so many in fact that it required for the meeting to move from his office to this chamber. The elder shinobi and council members sitting down while the rest of the men were lined against the walls of the hall. Only small parts of the jonin present were the ones that would be assigned teams. The rest, it seemed, were simply present because this was the year that Uchiha Sasuke would be assigned to a team. Other than jonin, a few chunin were present, a few of the council members were present, and of course those ninjas who had family waiting to be picked. He could see the clan heads all gathered discussing quietly amongst themselves. Most likely about how they should change Naruto's training regime now that he was becoming a sensei. Sarutobi thought grimly. Pardon me, Hokage-sama, but can we not start since it seems everyone is here? Yes, the reason he had a headache in the first place. Naruto, where are you? Just as the thought was going through his head, he noticed the doors to the council chamber open and a masked face pop his head inside. Sorry I'm late. I was just finalizing the teams before I realized I was late. Naruto spoke as he scratched the back of his head, carrying a large folder in his other hand. Entering the room, Naruto noticed several of the council and jonin present staring at him slack-jawed. Those that had never seen him before muttering about his height and size, guessing his age, and just in general talking about him. I guess some people are surprised to see me. Wait, Hokage-sama. A loud voice erupted from the group of chunin present. Naruto turned to see the teacher from the academy with the scar across his nose that he had seen on several occasions at Ichiraku's. Do you mean that Umbu-san here was the one to design the teams this year? What about my recommendations to you? Some muttering could be heard going on throughout the crowd as they looked between the Hokage and the teacher. I assure you, Irika, that I trust Naruto-kun here to arrange the teams accordingly. I gave him all the information that you gave me on the student this year, so he used that in making his decision. Naruto could already hear the muttering of his name spreading throughout the room amongst those that didn't know beforehand. Some of the chunin and jonin around the room looking at him differently now that they knew he was named after a ramen topping. Well, I guess my name was gonna come out sooner or later. What about the senseis that were requesting specific genin to form our team? Hokage-sama, a voice called out from the other side of the room. Out of the crowd stepping a beautiful woman with long dark locks of hair and ruby-red eyes. I assure you, Kurenai, that I gave all of the information and requests regarding team formation to Naruto-kun here. There is no need to fret, let's just listen to how he decided to arrange the teams. Hiruzen quickly calmed her down as Naruto was starting to feel more and more nervous about the choices he made and all the stares he was receiving. So Naruto, let's hear the 3 teams that you expect to pass first. Okay then, Naruto stated as he set down the folder on the table in front of him. Well, I guess I will start with the team that everyone is interested in. Team 7, led by Hatake Kakashi, will be made up of Uchiha Sasuke, Harino Sakura, and Suzuki Hitoshi. Naruto could see nods of approval coming from different council members and even Irika as the group stood looking at him. Naruto smiled under his mask as he realized that he had pleased some of the people around him. And explained the reasoning for this makeup also Naruto-kun. Naruto heard Sarutobi ask. Well, I figured that the only real teacher for Sasuke would have to be Kakashi-senpai. Considering that they are the last 2 in Konoha who currently possess the Sharingan eye. It only made sense to have Kakashi-senpai teach him how to use it properly. More nods of approval were given throughout the chamber. It has also been tradition amongst us to put the lowest ranked student with the highest ranked student to help balance the team and give it a better chance at survival. Suzuki Hitoshi, though a year younger than everyone else, is currently the lowest ranked student and Uchiha Sasuke is the highest. Then we have the female of the group, Harino Sakura. If we are to consider each of the genin as one category of ninja, Uchiha Sasuke the ninjutsu powerhouse of the group, and Suzuki Hitoshi the taijutsu user of the group, then we will likely be considering Harino Sakura the genjutsu user. She displays excellent book smarts, and has nearly the highest chakra control of the class. Very good, Naruto. Naruto beamed underneath his mask at the Hokage's praise. That was exactly how I was planning to arrange that team. It even matches the recommendations of Irika-san. The old man glanced over at the Chunin, and was pleased to see the smile on the face of the schoolteacher. Aha! Naruto had the good decency to look a little sheepish under the praise. Should I move on then? Of course. Naruto took a deep breath before this one and braced himself. Team 8, led by Yuhi Kurenai, will consist of Abirame Shino, Inazuka Kiba, and Yamanka Ino. What? Was yelled out loudly by Yamanka Inoichi, Yuhi Kurenai, and Yumino Irika all at once as they stepped forward. Saw this one coming, Naruto thought grimly. Hokage-sama, I thought you said that he took into consideration the placements that I recommended? I have worked with these students for years and I don't think that this placement can be allowed. Irika got in quickly before the other 2 could launch their protests. I requested for Hyuga Hinata to be on this team for a specific purpose, Hokage-sama. I wanted to create the best tracking and reconnaissance team in Konoha, and these 3 specific students are what I researched to be the best. Kurenai shouted out. I do not believe that my daughter will be very pleased with this arrangement, Hokage-sama. I fail to see how putting her with this team and splitting up the Ino Shikicho trio would work to Konoha's advantage. Not only that, I do not believe she is good with animals. Inoichi spoke up for his daughter. Meanwhile, Naruto just stood there while questions were being bombarded towards the Hokage. He had a feeling that this team would cause a large disagreement between him and Kurenai. Not to mention that one of his own senseis, Inoichi, might get fairly ticked off by his opinions on this matter. Calm down, you 3. Sarutobi grumbled as he pinched the bridge of his nose in annoyance at the 3 adults. This is most surprising, Naruto-kun. Would you mind explaining your reasoning to those against you? Yeah. I knew that this would probably cause some problems. Naruto laughed lightly, trying to lift the mood slightly, and failing miserably, he noticed. Irika-san, right? Correct. The teacher nodded back to him. Well, I read the folder you gave to Hokage-sama very thoroughly and observed your students closely for the few days. I understand your feelings regarding the students, and I understand why you feel that this team will have some troubles. Personally, I think that it will struggle at first. Then why would you set the team up this way? Irika argued hotly, believing Naruto to be admitting to setting up a poorly designed team. Because quite frankly, I am putting these students with Kurenai-san because Ino needs an attitude adjustment. Naruto folded his arms against his chest as he looked at a few of the stunned faces around the room. No offense, Inoichi-sama, but your daughter's attitude just isn't going to cut it in the ninja world. She is too used to getting things her way and being in charge. She is spoiled, and it's the fault of both the father and the teacher for not telling her how it is. Inoichi's mouth was agape as he sat in his seat, wide-eyed at Naruto's comments. Next to him, Choza and Shikaku were laughing loudly at their friend's state. Several other council members were snickering slightly at the words, but it was clear to see that Irika was slightly offended. I always told you she was being spoiled by Daddy Inoichi. Shikako laughed next his friend. What do you mean, Naruto? How could my teaching have affected her in such a way? Iruka sputtered out. Meanwhile, Inoichi had shut his mouth and was looking at Naruto with a glare that promised pain at their next training session. Let me read 2 comments made by Ino herself about the 2 teammates she is being placed with. When asked about Inuzuka Kiba, she said, "Mud boy? He smells way too gross for me to get near him." And when asked about Aburame, Shino, "Bugs are gross. I don't want anything to do with him." Those are the 2 things she said most recently about her 2 classmates. In his daughter's absence, Inoichi had the good decency to look embarrassed by the feral glare coming from Inuzuka Tsum and the emotionless one from Aburame Shibi. Other shinobi around the room simply couldn't believe how rude the girl could be to 2 classmates. Ino needs to be prepared to deal with teams that may not always be to her liking. Teams will change depending on the mission requirements, and she will be in teams with Inuzukas, Aburames, Sarutobi's, and more in the future. We are all ninja of Konoha. But how would being on a team that she would hate make her any better? Shouldn't it be a more gradual lesson? Iruka looked slightly embarrassed at the entire hall hearing about the misgivings of his own student. Well, not only would it teach her a lesson about not always getting things her way, but to be quite honest, it's also the best sensei for her. Kurenai raised her eyebrow in suspicion at Naruto's praise. From all the reports I have read about the senseis this year, she is only one I can see that won't put up with Ino's attitude and let her walk all over her. She seems to be the only one I can see that can really whip Ino into a more proper kunoichi. Hiruzen smirked underneath his hat as he observed the debate. He has really thought a lot about this, he thought with a smile. While I might agree that I would never let Ino walk all over me, Kurenai spoke as she stepped in front of Naruto. I requested Hyuga Hinata on my team for a specific reason. Her Byakugan would be one of the greatest assets of my team for tracking and reconnaissance. I think you are slightly underestimating the other 2 squad members and even the Yamanka techniques themselves if you believe that your squad would not be able to fit your requests. Kurenai's glared at Naruto verbal jab. Inuzuka noses are the best tracking noses in the entire village, Aburame insects are some of the best miniature scouts, and their ability to track chakra makes them invaluable. And let's not forget that Yamanka mind techniques could allow Ino to inhabit an animal, or even a member of the opposing faction, and scout that way. Doing those 2 things could pose a risk for Ino. Kurenai countered hotly, not willing to let Naruto win this argument. There is risk in everything we do. And even if what you were to say is true, what right does your team have to leave another team without at least a decent tracker? We are lucky that if anyone can boast to be a near-equal tracker to an Inuzuka, it's Kakashi-senpai for Team 7. That would still leave Team 10 without a good scout if I were to give you Hyuga Hinata, which would only hurt the balancing of the teams. Naruto's raised his voice. I hardly see how not putting Hinata in that team would hurt their ability as a team. If anything, it would be better to have Ino in that team to continue the legacy their parents created. Just because their parents created a great legacy hardly means that it will work for the children. Their personalities do not mesh in the same way that their parents did. Fact is that I would make the best teacher for Hinata and you would make the best for Ino. Kurenai glared hard at the boy-masked boy before her. Just what makes you think you can teach her better than me? She has near-perfect chakra control. She could easily learn my techniques and even bring them to a new level eventually. Which is exactly what she doesn't need. Naruto growled out, his anger starting to get the better of him. If you think that teaching her genjutsu and the range techniques that you are used to are going to help her, you are dead wrong. She is a member of the Hyuga clan. She needs training with someone who has experience with their techniques and knows the best ways to fight against one. She needs someone who can help with both her clan techniques and her ninja techniques. And you are that person? She hissed at him. Yes. No other person in this room is as familiar with the Hyuga style and fighting against it as I am. Hayashi-sama can attest to that personally. Naruto shouted as he turned to Hayashi, who nodded his head in agreement to the claim. I can train her better than anyone in this room can. This was my decision on making the team. Hiruzen raised his eyebrows slightly at the last exchange. Naruto's origin and training had been kept a secret since that night, but small bits of information was starting to come out. His well-trained ears could hear people whispering about what the connection was between Naruto and Hayashi. You are not the one who chooses the teams. That is the responsibility of Hokage-sama. A loud cough erupted after this spoken. Everyone turned to see the Hokage had stood up and was glaring at the 2 bickering in the center of the room. Calm down now, you 2. Kurenai, please return to where you were standing and leave Naruto-kun alone. Kurenai muttered a small apology to the Hokage as she walked back to where she had been standing earlier. His gaze now leveled at Naruto, he began. While I do not fully agree with all of your reasoning on this matter, Naruto-kun, I must agree that among the possible teachers this year, you would make the best sensei for young Hinata-chan. For now I agree to your choice for Team 8. A small grin appeared on Hayashi's face as his plans came into fruition. Next to him, Shikaku leant in closely to whisper into his ear. You didn't happen to have a hand in this team making, did you, Hayashi-sama? After all, Naruto looks up to you more than any of us. Shikaku whispered with a smirk. We both know that if I told Naruto to put my daughter on his team, that he would have done just the opposite, Shikaku. Hayashi whispered back, causing the other man to laugh and agree with the statement. Are you upset at all about the teams so far? Haha, are you kidding? There are only 2 other students, besides your daughter, that are left, and we know who is going to teach them. We are about to hear some good news, right? Shikaku whispered as he grinned largely. Team 10 will be made up of Kimichi Choji, Hyuga Hinata, and Nara Shikamaru. The squad will be led by me. Naruto shouted out loudly. Very good news indeed. Hayashi spoke softly with a smile. The room seemed incredibly quiet compared to the noisy place it had been only hours before. It would be one of those nights that would remain in the elderly Hokage's memory for many years to come for. He feared it would also be one of those nights that caused a headache that would last nearly as long. The kid seems to cause you a lot of headaches, old man. A gruff voice called out. Hiruzen didn't need to turn around to know it was his son speaking to him, sensing his son's chakra entering the room a moment ago. The smell of cigarette smoke drifted into his nostrils as Asuma lit a cigarette in the corner of the room before walking over besides the window Hiruzen had been staring out of. Yes, he is very good at causing those sorts of problems. The Hokage commented sadly as he pulled his own pipe out of his robe. I must admit, he caused quite the commotion tonight. That's a bit of an understatement, Asuma stated, causing a small chuckle from his father. I was waiting out there for hours before the last ones left. I take it they weren't happy? I received quite the earful from Danzo, Hamura, and Koharu. The old Hokage chuckled out. My old teammates were none too happy about letting Naruto become a sensei, though I really think they were just mad that I didn't inform them of my decision to let him become a teacher. And what did that old warmonger have to say about it? Sarutobi let out a long sigh at this one. Same thing he always says about Naruto, that he should be treated as the weapon he has been trained to be. He just doesn't want Naruto to become a sensei because he feels Naruto can still be of greater use in the Anbu for missions. He has a point there, Asuma commented. The kid gets missions done in record time and gets them done efficiently. It would be quite a blow to the power of our Anbu. Yes, but not a blow to our overall strength as a village. I'm sure he will be rushing for his team to do higher ranked missions quickly. And if he can train his students as well as he believes he can, they may become a force to be reckoned with as well. You really think he can lead this team? I still can't help but feel that I was conned into this. Hiruzen muttered out loud. But I still have faith in him. I must admit, he did do his research for picking the teams out, and while they are not quite the teams I would have selected, they are still fair and will work. I trust him. I don't think Kurenai was very happy about the selection, Asuma said as he looked out towards where he knew Kurenai lived. True, but she will have to get over it. Hiruzen cast a glance at his son, curious as to why he would be here. The disagreements the two held in the past that caused Asuma to join the 12 Guardian Ninja were never truly settled between the father and son. So do you have a complaint about the team arrangements also? I thought you were looking to take the Ino Shikacho team. Nah, I think I was just looking for an easy ride with the Ino Shikacho team anyway. This way, I'll get more free time and maybe I can give that nephew some of that training he's been begging for. Asuma commented, walking towards the exit. Maybe I'll help him plan his next ambush on you. A small tick appeared on the old Hokage's forehead at the thought of his grandson's attempts to ambush him. Walking towards his office, he could only think of one way to relieve his stress as he reached his desk. It's times like these where it's best to take Tsunade's approach to relieve stress. He sighed as he reached into his desk for a bottle of sake. She had been awake for hours now. Nervousness and fear clawed at her as she sat in her room, staring out the window towards where the sun had only just begun to rise. Who would be on her team? Would she have a nice sensei? Would her team like her? Would she just be a burden to them? Thoughts like these had been running through the young Hyuga's head since she had woken up in a cold sweat at near 3 in the morning. She had long since bathed and changed into her training clothes, figuring that she would not see sleep again this morning. It seemed nothing could distract her mind right from the moment that would set forth the path of her future ninja career, mere hours away. Not even the knocking on her door could snap her from her thoughts until she felt the hand on her shoulder. Hinata-sama? The worried branch girl asked the shocked-looking Hyuga heiress. I am sorry to intrude, Hinata-sama, but you wouldn't respond to my calls. No, it's okay, Hanako-chan, Hinata responded after she steadied her rapidly beating heart. Suddenly she started panicking again as a thought crossed her mind. Am I late for training with Elder Hisao? Hinata asked as she stood up, quickly worried. No, Hinata-sama. The elders were in a meeting until just now. Your father wishes to see you. He said your training was cancelled this morning. Hinako answered as she bowed and walked out of the room, leaving a stunned heiress behind her. Father wants to see me? She thought in a panic, running to the mirror on her wall to check her appearance. She looked as tired as she felt, not to mention slightly pale, but other than that she appeared well-groomed enough to appear before her father. Her heart pounding, she stepped out of her room and walked down the hallway to where her father's study waited. She knocked softly on the door before calling out to her father. Ota-sama? You requested my presence? She spoke softly through the door. I doubt I would have heard that, had I not been right behind you. Her father's voice came from behind her, causing the girl to jump and turn in fright. His face was a mask of calm indifference as he stood out in the hallway. Come inside, daughter. He slid open the door to his study and walked inside. Hinata had only been in this room a few times in her entire life, but she knew one day it could be her own study. Her father sat behind his desk and gestured for her to sit across from him. With a lowered gaze, she obediently sat down in front of him. Hayashi stared at his eldest child with slight remorse. He knew he had been neglecting her over the years, clan business and Naruto's training getting in the way. He would see her every day amongst the compound and for meals, but he never got to spend time with her like this, away from the eyes of the clan. A welcome change for him, but she seemed rather apprehensive about being in front of him. Are you feeling well? You look tired. Hinata shyly looked up at her father. Jigomen, I had trouble sleeping. She berated herself heavily for stuttering in front of her father. She nervously bit the inside of her cheek as she felt her father's gaze upon her. Seeing her tepidness in front of him, Hayashi couldn't help but be reminded of the meeting he had just left and the mixture of emotions he had felt. Flashback. Knowing how to suppress emotions had become a sort of art form for Hayashi. Anger was by far the hardest emotion to suppress, and this was the emotion battling to make its appearance, as he listened to the elders before him. Raw emotions burned inside of him, begging him to be let loose and to strike nearly every member of this council down. I would like for you to repeat your request. Came out of Hayashi's mouth as monotone and emotionless as possible, enough to convince even those who knew him that Hayashi was as serene as ever. Elder Hisao bowed his head only slightly to acknowledge the request of his leader before speaking. We wish for young Lady Hinata to be removed from the position of heiress to the clan. A small murmur of agreement rose throughout a great deal of the council member. Several of the members, Hayashi noticed, seemed just as puzzled as he was. What reasons could there possibly be for this? I would like to hear your reasoning behind this. Of course, Hayashi-sama, Hisao stated as he rose from his position to address the council. Hinata-sama, like all Hyuga children, has been given a high level of training. Where those children succeeded, however, Hinata-sama has proven to fail. Hayashi glared only a small amount as he took in the information Hisao had just spoken. For Hisao to be so confident in his speech and have it this well prepared, he had been planning this for at least a short while. 8 years ago, you asked us, the council, to oversee your daughter's training, Hayashi-sama. Your reasoning was that you were working hard at improving the Juken, and you took to training heavily every day of the week in your private study. A few of the council members all looked at him to see if he would give any news on his progress. The development of new techniques for the clan would increase its overall strength, and when Hayashi first proposed the idea, it was accepted with great excitement. The truth was that it was simply an excuse to prevent the council from learning of Naruto's training. It was the easiest way for Hayashi to gain the necessary amount of time to train Naruto to reach the maximum of his potential along with the other clan leaders. Hayashi knew that if the council members were to ever find out that he was teaching Namake's Minato's only son, all hell would break loose. Your training and your heavy workload as both a clan head and a leader amongst the council of Konoha was taking up the majority of your time. It was for those reasons that I took it upon myself to train your eldest daughter in the ways of Juken. Hisao paused for a moment as if to consider his words, but Hayashi could tell it was simply for dramatic effect. I have been disappointed to a level that I can no longer stand. She has no skill in the art of Juken at all. This caused small gasps to come up amongst some of the members of the council. She can rarely get into the correct stances or forms without my assistance, she cannot strike the targets as precisely as is to be required by our style, and her younger sister has already surpassed her skill level. Why was her lack of development never brought to me before this, Hisao? Hayashi questioned seriously. I am sorry, Hayashi-sama, but I and those members of the council that I asked for support in the training of your daughter thought it would not be right to interrupt your work. Instead, we felt it better to push for your daughter's skill to be raised higher. Sadly, all of our training has seen very little results. Hayashi stared at the man for a long time as he contemplated what he should do. Those members of the council that had not participated in her training also seemed to be in deep thought at the reasons. Perhaps it would be best if I were to take a more active role in the training of my daughter. No offense, Hayashi-sama, but those are not the only reasons that we propose this. Your daughter's emotions are hardly that of leader. She has a weak attitude that is hard befitting of a Hyuga, let alone the leader of our clan. It would be an embarrassment to our honor to put someone so weak in such a position. Once again a spark of anger started to burn within Hayashi's soul as he was interrupted. Looking around at the different members of the council, he could see the nods of agreement being shown openly as they listened to Hisao, although some still seemed somewhat hesitant to take such drastic action, without seeing the proof with their own eyes. Slowly though, Hayashi was starting to realize that he hadn't seen his daughter trained since she was 4 years of age, that the only time he spent with her was meals in silence, and that he was holding her fate in his hands right now. Could he really have neglected his own child so much in favor of training his friend's son? The council would like to take a vote on the issue. Flashback end. Hinata, the council has asked me to remove you as heir and to remove you from this family. A gasp was let loose as wide, scared lavender eyes met his own in an instant. Tears started to form at the edge of her vision, and Hayashi could practically see her world crashing down her. Her head became downcast, and he could hear her breathing pick up as she panicked, assuming the worst. I refused, my child. Another gasp was heard as Hinata's head once again shot up to look at her father. You are my daughter and my heir. These things are my business, and the council will not change this so easily. Oh, Tosama, Hinata whispered out disbelievingly from her sitting place. A soft look had come over her father's face, a face she had not seen since her mother had passed away after the birth of her younger sister. They told me that you are severely lacking in your Juken ability, a flaw that I can only blame myself for. Hinata's eyes grew wide as she stared at her father. I have neglected you of the time with me that you deserve. And no, Otosama. Hinata did her best to restrain the stutter that wanted to jump out of her mouth at any moment. Waking up this morning, she never in her life expected a conversation like this to occur. And the shock of the event was truly playing on her nerves as she tried to speak. You are a very busy man, father. I can't expect you to always watch over me. Hayashi stared at his daughter as she shyly ducked her head and looked down. A forlorn look was upon his face as he listened to her words. You are far more mature than I ever knew, Hinata. Now that I realize just how I have used my time these past years, I can't help but regret not spending more time like this with you and your sister, especially now when you have graduated and will be spending more time outside. There is still time, Otosama, Hinata spoke out softly with small smile. Hayashi could just barely make out her eyes from underneath her hair looking at him. Yes, there is, but not right now, I am afraid. Hinata looked up at him slightly confused. I believe you have to go meet your new team soon. Hinata gasped loudly as she realized the time and bowed quickly in front of her father. At his nod she stood up quickly and moved for the door. Oh, and Hinata? Her father's voice stopped her in her tracks as she reached the door. I know you will make me proud in the future. Why yes, Otosama. She responded with a slight blush as she exited quickly. Before the door could shut behind her, a hand appeared to stop it from closing. The branch guard normally positioned outside of his door stepped inside quickly. Hayashi-sama, Elder Nobuo wishes to speak with you and is waiting outside. He spoke out quickly. At Hayashi's nod, the guard walked back outside and let the elder inside before shutting the door. The elder walked in front of Hayashi before bowing deeply. Hayashi-sama, the elder spoke out nervously. We have known each other since we were young children, Nobuo. I think so formalities aren't necessary in here, my old friend. Hayashi spoke with a ghost of a smile on his face. Nobuo visibly relaxed slightly, but still looked very tense as he sat down before Hayashi. What seems to be troubling you? Hayashi watched Nobuo with a puzzled expression. Nobuo had never been the type to be nervous in front of him, and had never been the type to have trouble expressing himself, but something was deeply bothering him if he acted this way. Do you really know what you are doing? If you are referring to me protecting my daughter, then yes, I know what I am doing. Hayashi's eyes narrowed as spoke. Nobuo had always shown good faith to the decisions he made on the council and had on occasion spoken with Hayashi to give advice, but this was different than the ways they conversed in the past. Hayashi, I admit I was as dubious to the claims made by Niseo as you yourself were. But when you stood up for your daughter and did not allow for a vote to take place, you angered a good majority of the council. Nobuo was trying his best to make Hayashi understand what exactly he had done. Those before that were as doubtful to the claims as we were, might now shift sides. You are saying that I should have risked the vote going very poorly and let my daughter be removed from her home, rather than not allowing that chance to ever happen. Hayashi questioned, shocking Nobuo in his seat, a panicked look coming across his older friend's face. No, that's not. Nobuo let out a deep sigh as he couldn't really argue with the statement. Hayashi, you are my friend. I just don't want something bad to happen to you and your family. The council has a lot of influence in the clan, and if they can convince a good majority of the clan that Hinata is unfit to lead. You truly are a good friend. Hayashi spoke softly, looking at his old friend. Nobuo looked on in shock as he saw the confidence in Hayashi's demeanor. The clan leader that he knew, Hayashi, was sitting right in front of him with all the regal of royalty. All I ask is that you believe in my decisions. Hinata will have the strength to lead this clan in the future. For the first time since entering the room, Nobuo held a small real smile on his face. I don't know who or what it is that had been affecting you these past years, Hayashi, but you most certainly have changed from the strict and proper Hyuga I knew as a child. Hayashi sat in a small stunned state as Nobuo exited his study, his last words circling his mind as he stared ahead in a stunned state. When the door closed, Hayashi swiftly stood, walking to the doors that linked his private dojo to his study. Passing through the room to the opposite wall, he opened a set of shoji doors leading to a small, enclosed courtyard for the head family's use only. The small enclosure was a place for Hayashi to rest his weary mind. Half of the yard was dedicated to just grass where he could either rest or practice, while the other half held a small Zen garden originally placed there by his ancestors many generations ago that he attended to every day. Picking up the rake from where he placed it the day before, Hayashi set to his work, leaving his mind free to wander. Just how much has the Namikaze family changed me as a person? The thought stuck to his mind like glue. Would I be like those elders in there if not for Minato and Naruto? Willing to throw my own daughter out so easily at the first signs of weakness? The blonde stood in front of shoji door, wrapped in concentration as his palm rested on the frame. A drip of sweat rolled down his cheek as he focused on the sliding door in front of him, just one of many he had passed through during his time here. After a few more minutes of waiting, the door finally slid open, allowing him to relax. He slowly opened his eyes, letting them adjust to the new sight in front of him. For as far as he could see, there was only a dark and damp tunnel. What was once tatami flooring changed to a warm wet concrete, and what was once shoji walls changed to solid walls with leaking pipes running through and around them. A feeling of dread washed over him as he stared down into the darkness. Still not good enough, Inoichi whispered to himself, feeling the sensation of being pulled backwards as his consciousness returning to his body. Opening his eyes, he stared down at the pouting demon container in front of him, Inoichi's hand still resting on his head. Your blockers are still not good enough. If I could get through them in a matter of hours, Naruto-kun, Inoichi remarked. I understand how much you dislike genjutsu, but your secrets need to be protected. Ga! I know. Naruto yelled out as he flopped backwards in frustration, laying on the ground and staring skywards. I just suck at genjutsu. This is why you need to train harder at it. Inoichi scolded, frustrated. I know you are more worried about fighting face to face, but you must also be prepared if, kami forbid, anything actually happens and you are captured. You must know these things so that your secrets, and the secrets of the village, aren't used against you. But I already have so many defenses in my subconscious. I mean, it's not like they are going to make their way through those tunnels. Naruto pleaded to the older blonde. Inoichi pinched the bridge of his nose in annoyance. No, Naruto, that is not enough for you. You can't rely on something that you yourself don't completely understand yet. We have been over this before. He glanced down at the blonde and sighed. Are your clones supposed to dissipate soon? Inoichi asked with restrained anger at seeing Naruto not really paying attention. Yeah, my clones are training with Shikako-sensei and Tsum-sensei on strategy and tracking right now. They should dissipate any minute. As if on cue, Naruto's eyes lost their focus as his mind started to process the masses of information being sent in. Years ago, after Naruto had learned about the memory transfer, he and his teachers had all agreed to make sure to not dissipate all his clones at once. Never one to miss an opportunity, Inoichi cocked his fist back, striking the blonde across the cheek just as his eyes came back into focus, sending him flying back to the other side of the room. What the hell? You sucker punched me! Naruto yelled out indignantly from the floor, jumping to his feet and growling at the Yamanaka. You mean like the sucker punch you dealt me last night at the team assignment meeting? Inoichi growled out, eyes narrowing slightly. An embarrassed look came over Naruto's face as he scratched the back of his head. Still pretty pissed about that, huh? Naruto let out a loud gulp as the angry Yamanaka began to stalk towards him. Oh, look at the time, need to go get ready to pick up my team, he said nervously, forming a seal and poofing out of the room as quickly as he could. Iruka stared at the sheet in his hands with a contemplative look. The teams he had thought would work out well together, and please everyone had been rejected and changed to ones created by a man who had never once met the students that he cared for, someone that never spent any time at all with them, and now had just had a hand in determining their very futures. Glancing up at the rows of empty desks in front of him, he could clearly picture the face of every student that would be arriving within minutes. Could Naruto, as Hokage-sama referred to him last night, do the same thing? Could he possibly know how this small change could so dramatically affect how the students are going to react to their assignments? No, he couldn't possibly. As Iruka stared down at the roster, looking at Team 10 in particular, he couldn't help but feel nervous for his students as he gazed at the name of their sensei. A shinobi that had become renowned throughout the Konoha in just a few years, a man whom he had never met before, and a man that had never once shown his face in public was going to be taking his precious students. Hokage-sama trusts him completely. I should too. Iruka tried to convince himself, but he could tell it wasn't working. He had been nervous about handing students over to certain jounin before, but this just felt different. It felt like he was giving them to a demon. Perhaps I can talk to Hokage-sama later about Naruto just to find out more. Iruka thought as he noticed some of his students starting to file into the classroom, each one with the hetaite they had earned yesterday. He smiled softly as he watched them start to chat amongst themselves and their potential teams. A loud pop in the chair next to him redirected Iruka's attention to Mizuki, who was now leaning back in his chair looking rather tired. Didn't get much rest? Iruka questioned with a chuckle. The only response was an agitated glance and groan before Mizuki closed his eyes, resting his head face down on the desk. Iruka just laughed at his friend's misery, turning to notice the door opening and Hyuga Hinata walk in with an odd look on her face. Is everything alright, Hinata-chan? You are later than usual. Iruka asked as the girl passed his desk. She stopped abruptly at the sound of her name and turned towards Iruka. Jigomen Iruka-sensei, I just had an interesting morning is all. The girl responded quietly. Iruka looked at her worriedly for a few moments longer before letting out a long sigh. Well, if there is anything I can help you with, don't hesitate to ask, okay? The girl nodded quickly before hurrying up to her seat near the back. At the same time, he saw Choji and Shikamaru walk in together, Choji eating a bag of chips at near double the speed that Iruka had ever seen before, and Shikamaru looking rather annoyed at his friend. As they passed Iruka's desk, Shikamaru answered Iruka's silent question. He's just nervous about the team assignments, Shikamaru said as he and his friend walked up the stairs towards their desks, sitting down and waiting for the last few stragglers to walk in now. After a few more minutes, the entire class had arrived, all ready to hear their team assignments. I think they've waited long enough now, Iruka thought as he stood up and moved to stand in front of the class with his clipboard in hand. A near immediate silence overcame the room as the scarred chunin stood in front of the eager-looking students. A small smile crept onto his face as he looked at the ninja he had helped produce. Starting today, all of you are real shinobi. But you are still genin, and the hard journey that lies ahead is just beginning. Large grins broke out amongst the young genin, each one dreaming of the different ranks and goals they would accomplish in their future. Now you will soon get missions to help out the village. So today we are going to create 3-man teams, and each team will have a jounin sensei. You will follow your sensei's instructions to successfully complete each and every mission. Now we tried to balance each team's strengths. Iruka began listing the teams in succession one after another. Quickly friends were separated, girls heard their dreams shatter as they were placed on teams separated from their crushes, and rivalries were beginning to form. Students sat in their seats excitedly waiting for their names to be called and all waited anxiously for the team with Uchiha Sasuke in it to be announced. Team 7 will consist of Harino Sakura, Suzuki Hitoshi, and Uchiha Sasuke. Reactions were immediate as those girls who had yet to have their names called all cursed their luck as Sakura let out a loud cheer at her success. Sasuke showed very little reaction to the commotion happening about him, choosing to simply ignore the bickering girls. Iruka noticed Hitoshi didn't seem terribly affected by the news himself, instead only looking more focused than he had before. Team 8 will consist of Aburaim Shino, Inuzuka Kiba. Iruka braced himself for the eruption that he knew was coming. And Yamanka Ino. What? A loud screech pierced the eardrums of all in the classroom. Ino stood glaring furiously, her hands slammed down on the desk in front of her. Her new teammate Kiba, however, was on the ground twitching after falling from his chair from the screech in his sensitive ears. Several rows up above her, Shikamaru and Choji looked at the scene with disbelief written across their faces. I'm teamed with the mutt and bug boy, Ino shrieked out as she stood on the top of her chair. Shit, Shikamaru muttered quietly to Choji. I must have fallen asleep while Iruka-sensei was giving that boring speak. Ouch. Shikamaru rubbed the bump forming on the back of his head as he glared at Choji. What was that for? Didn't think a pinch would be enough proof that you were awake. Choji said, still disbelievingly, as he watched Ino rant at Irika-sensei from the top of her chair. The blonde girl was still screeching at the top of her lungs about her new teammates, and not with Sasuke, not noticing the angry looks her new teammates were sending her. Enough, Ino! The whole classroom quieted immediately as normally kind teacher erupted, the size of his head seemingly tripled as he yelled at the blonde girl. It's time for you to grow up, Ino. Time for you to learn that things in life aren't always fair and that you need to deal with it. The teams have been balanced this way. If there is a need to make a change, Hokage-sama will see that it's done. Ino stood shocked, her mouth gaping open like a fish at being yelled at. When her senses came back to her, she was about to protest more, but the look on her sensei's face told her that she wouldn't get anywhere with that, and the glare coming from her new teammate was keeping her quiet too. She would just have to hope the teams got changed soon. Team 10 will be Akimichi Choji, Hyuga Hinata, and Nara Shikamaru. Iruka spoke out, happy to finally be done reading off the roster. He noticed a number of shocked and angry-looking faces, but it was something he had seen in the past too, so it didn't bother him too much. His worry was more directed towards how Team 10 would fare with their new sensei. Now we are going to break until after lunchtime. I want you all to go out and get used to your new teammates, and then come back here to meet your new sensei after lunch. This is a miracle, Shikamaru muttered as he walked along next to Choji. To his other side, Hinata walked next to him, trailing just slightly. She had yet to speak much except for her original greeting and seemed nervous as she walked next to the two best friends. Yeah, I was convinced that Ino would be on our team. Choji spoke as he reached into the pouch hanging off his side for another bag of chips. He didn't notice Hinata grimace slightly at his statement. Ayano. Eh? Shikamaru questioned at the sound. Turning around, he noticed Hinata standing there looking nervous. What is it, Hinata? Did you want Ino-san on the team? She questioned meekly. No, was the blunt answer she received from Shikamaru. Choji, on the other hand, just laughed nervously at the question. Damn woman is far too annoying. Oh, I see. A small smile made its way onto Hinata's face, before she noticed the two were starting to leave without her. So where do you want to get lunch at anyway, Choji? We have to be back in time to meet our new sensei. Shikamaru asked as the group entered the busier shopping districts of Konoha. So that means no all-you-can-eat places. That last comment drew a large groan from his plump friend. I know it's troublesome, but we gotta be back in time. Shikamaru interrupted his friend before he could protest. So let's just find somewhere to umph. The next thing he knew, Shikamaru was lying on his back with a heavy weight on top of him. Opening his eyes revealed bright blue eyes staring down into his with a confused look on both faces. Oh crap. Sorry, the young boy announced before jumping off Shikamaru and lending him a hand up. He was wearing some dirty-looking khaki pants and a blue shirt that looked as if it had seen some better days. His face was the most distinctive part though, being that he had two bandages over both of his cheeks and a beanie cap covering all but the slightest amount of blonde hair peeking out from underneath. I'm so sorry, man. I was just playing a game with some of my friends and accidentally ran into you, he explained as he tried patting off the dirt on Shikamaru's clothing. He stopped immediately when he noticed the headband tied around Shikamaru's arm. Whoa! You're a ninja! Man, I just arrived at this village and was hoping to go to the academy. Are all of you ninja? Yes, Shikamaru acknowledged, his eyebrow twitching just a bit from the speed setting this kid seemed to be on. Oh man, this is so cool! He shouted before grabbing Choji's hand and shaking it and then grabbing Hinata's. Hinata felt a blush creep up her face as the blue eyes lingered on her for a second. The close attention making her feel slightly lightheaded as the boy continued to circle around them and sing their praises. Something about his eyes seemed slightly familiar to her. You guys are the youngest ninjas I have met. A loud crashing noise came from behind where the hyper kid had come from. Several men had come down the path he had taken with a look of fury in their eyes. Oh, there are my friends now. Well, gotta run, he said quickly before taking off down the street into the more densely populated market area, the three teammates behind him just staring at the scene with confusion written on their faces. What just happened? Choji asked as the boy got further away. I don't know, but I am glad it's over with, Shikamaru replied. Get back here, thief! A voice from behind them shouted. The men that had been chasing the boy caught up and started to run past them, leaving only a dreadful feeling in their wake as the three shinobi realized what was just yelled. Immediately the three began reaching for their wallets containing their money. Out of the three, only Choji was able to bring his out while Shikamaru cursed and Hinata looked crestfallen. Crap, well, if we're lucky, one of the patrols should capture him soon and return our wallets, Hinata. Shikamaru muttered. Couldn't we just go after him and help those men? Hinata asked. Nah. That's the job of the patrols around here, the Nara said lazily before sighing. Thanks to that, I have no money for lunch. Wonder why he left Choji's wallet though. Shikamaru muttered at the end while rubbing his chin. He must have known that I would have caught him in the act if he tried that on me, Choji boasted as he reached into his satchel to retrieve another bag of chips. A smile stayed on his face as he reached into the bag, but his hand didn't come out as his arm kept searching. A look of panic crept into his eyes as he opened the bag as wide as it could go and stared inside. Choji? Shikamaru questioned, looking at his panicking friend in concern when suddenly the plump boy took off at full speed in the direction the thief was heading, his arms raised high. He stole my chips, was the roar the two heard as Choji went barreling down the street at his top speed. Troublesome, Shikamaru yelled out before taking off after his friend with Hinata chasing along behind him, either of them sensing the Umbu standing on the roof above them, an amused grin under his mask as he followed the two. Heh, that was easier than I expected, the pickpocket remarked in surprise as he got away from the team of ninja and proceeded to mix in with the crowd. The sound of the vendors that were chasing him started to fade away as he slowed to a walk. What kind of ninja training did they receive? Geez. The boy took a glacé behind him, not seeing anyone paying attention to him. Might as well enjoy the snacks, I guess, he said to himself as he ripped the bag open in the crowd. As soon as he opened the bag, a low rumbling noise from behind earned his attention. His feet started to shake as the earth began rumbling. What the hell? An earthquake? Give me back my chips, was the roar he heard from behind him. Snapping around quickly, he saw the crowd part. Anyone too slow was sent flying into the air as an angry Akimichi came charging like a bull towards him. Behind the portly ninja, he could see the other two from the group following quickly behind and throwing out apologies to those unfortunate enough to have been run over. Holy crap! The pickpocket shouted before taking off in a sprint. Shikamaru managed to just barely hear the thief yell out in surprise before turning and dashing away from Choji. A small sigh of disappointment came out as his hopes of the pickpocket giving up easily and without a chase were dashed to bits. Choji didn't seem to mind though, as it only seemed to fuel the boy into running faster after his chips. I'm sorry. Shikamaru barely heard Hinata speak out to a lady that was starting to stand up after being knocked down by Choji. She shot a dark look at the two as they chased after their teammate. He's really fast for someone with no ninja training, Hinata remarked to him. That's because he is definitely not from out of town. He used the surprise from running into me to fool us. Shikamaru spat out as they finally caught up to Choji, Shikamaru to his right and Hinata to his left. Shikamaru kept looking to the roof, hoping to spot one of the ninja patrols that policed the city and being disappointed every time. Where are all the patrols at? I don't know. Hinata spoke, glancing around at the observation. Perhaps they are busy somewhere else? We're going to lose him in this crowd. Shikamaru noticed as the thief dodged in between the crowd like nothing was even there. He was definitely born in this village if he could move like that. Byakugan. Shikamaru glanced to his right and saw the veins around Hinata's eyes bulging out slightly, and he could just barely pick out a white pupil in her iris. Is that the Hyuga bloodline limit Dad was talking about? I won't lose him, Hinata reassured him, her voice wavering just slightly. Is she nervous? Or just tired already? Shikamaru wondered. Okay. We need to catch him and get our things back. He can't lose us now, so we just have to either wait for him to tire out or trap him. Shikamaru told the two, though Choji was still too focused on getting his chips back to pay much attention. Don't we have to be back in time to meet our sensei? Hinata mentioned nervously. Damn. We need to trap him then. Shikamaru cursed as he started to pick up some speed to catch up to the thief. Hinata, exactly what do your eyes do? Hinata started nervously. It gives me 360-degree vision around me and also the ability to look through objects and sort of telescopic vision. We can also see chakra, which gives us the ability to attack an enemy's chakra network. Shikamaru's wide-eyed look must have disturbed her as she started to blush at the stare. Wow, that pretty useful. It was talked about when we were learning about the founding clans in the academy. Hinata stuttered as she looked towards the thief again. I must have been asleep for that one. Shikamaru muttered quietly. Well, do you see anything that we can use to our advantage, Hinata? The crowd is growing larger further beyond him. And there are a lot of carts and street vendors up further. Shikamaru could see her eyes focusing harder as she squinted her eyes to see beyond the thief. There is something strange about his chakra? What do you mean? Shikamaru asked as he ran, but was surprised to hear the word thief yelled out loud as they passed an apple vendor. The vendor was cursing and pointing at the same thief that had stolen from them. He's still stealing as he runs? Apples! Hinata shouted out quickly. Yeah, I know they were apples. Shikamaru commented as he looked at Hinata, surprised when she reached her hand out and pushed his head down slightly. He barely felt an object skim through the spiked-up ponytail on the back of his head. He threw them. Hinata said after, embarrassed at pushing him down. Punk thief. Shikamaru muttered out as recovered his speed from the pushdown. Hinata avoided the apple towards her just fine, but Shikamaru let out a drop of sweat when he noticed the apple in Choji's mouth halfway eaten. Did you really just catch that with your mouth? Some mumbling was all Shikamaru could hear as Choji kept eating while trying to respond. Hinata looked just as astonished as Shikamaru did but tried to hide it as best she could. From what Shikamaru could tell, the thief was even slightly astonished as his head was slightly turned after throwing the fruit. Shikamaru's eyes widened as a cart started to cross the street ahead of them and an opportunity formed. You gotta be kidding me, the pickpocket yelled in astonishment as he saw two of them avoid the apples and the fat one just catches it in his mouth. He could see the Hyuga girl was easily keeping track of him in the crowd, so losing them was pretty unlikely without halting them somewhat. Look out, kid! Eh? The boy remarked as he heard the yell from in front of him, as a large wagon filled with fruit being pulled by a horse was crossing the street. His eyes widened in surprise at the roadblock. Whoa! He yelled out as he dropped down and slid underneath of the cart. Once on the other side, he was immediately back up and running, barely slowing down. He couldn't help but smile at the looks of surprise the pedestrians gave him as he ran through the streets. That cart should slow them down a bit. Glancing backwards, he saw the fat one and the one he ran into leap over the cart with ease and keep after him. Oh yeah, ninjas. The girl wasn't with them any longer though. Did she not leap over or what? Glancing around, he couldn't see her on the rooftops or anywhere else for that matter. It should just make it easier for him to get away from those two though if she had backed off. With that in mind, he kept running. He just needed to slip away into an alley somehow without them noticing. If he could just lose those two in the crowd, then it would be all too easy to get away by slipping into one of the many side streets and alleys that were all around Konoha. He knew that the crowd would reach its apex in size on this street, so it shouldn't be too hard to lose the slower two behind him. And just like that, he weaved in and out of the pedestrians as if they were never even there. He started crouching lower and lower to the ground as he ran through the taller adults and crowd, making it even harder for the two to spot him, and looking for just the right moment to slip away. The moment came sooner than he could have hoped when he noticed a group of women dressed in long, elegant kimonos walking across the street. Using their flowing dresses as cover, he quickly dove to the side and into an alley and hid as quickly as he could behind a few boxes stacked against the wall. Peeking just barely around the corner, he watched as the two looked around confusedly as they passed by the alley and continued down the street. The skinny one muttering to himself as he walked by the alley and the fat one looking as if he were going to break into tears after losing him. Too bad, guys, he whispered quietly as he started to walk down the alley, happy to have finally escaped with his earnings. A silhouette appeared at the end of the alley he was walking through though, blocking his path and making him stop. Huh! I'll return our belongings and I will let you go. The girl that had been chasing him earlier stuttered out as she blocked his path of escape. He noticed bulging veins around her eyes that kept glancing from his stomach to his eyes. I think I'll take option 2, he yelled out quickly. The girl's eyes widened in surprise as the boy turned and ran back in the direction of the main street. He was just rounding the corner when a fist appeared in his vision and knocked him cleanly in the nose. Oh. So, you got anything to say for yourself? Shikamaru said as he looked down at the boy sitting against the brick wall in the alley. 2 wads of tissue paper were lodged up his nose to stop the bleeding, but he still looked away defiantly from the trio with his arms crossed. Shikamaru just scratched the back of his head in annoyance and sighed. As Shikamaru-kun? Hinata tried to get the lazy boy's attention. How did you know he would run into a side alley? Shikamaru hummed. He kept running along the same street trying to mix in with the crowd. There were plenty of intersections where he could have turned at, but he kept the same street, so I figured he was trying to lose sight of us and duck into an alley on side. You can see through walls, so you were the best choice to trap him. Hinata's eyes widened in wonder at Shikamaru's revelation. Had he really planned that out so quickly? So you used the cart as an opportunity for me to get out of sight and run down a side street? Right. Shikamaru replied before putting his focus back on the thief that Choji was watching intently. So hand over our stuff, we don't have much time before our lunch break ends. Che. The thief spat as he reached into his pockets and grabbed the 2 wallets he had swiped from them and tossed them to their respective owners. Choji, though, stood there tapping his foot impatiently as he waited for his chips to be returned, only to have the pickpocket stare at him with a curious look. "Will you stop the tapping? Aren't you forgetting something?" The thief just looked at him, even more confused. "My chips!" Choji yelled, his loud voice blowing back the hairs on their heads. "Are you kidding?" The thief raised an eyebrow at him. "You scared me half to death, and I dropped those chips when you first started chasing me." All 3 of their mouths dropped open at the revelation, and the thief could hardly hold in the laughter at the sight. "Did you really just chase me for a bag of chips?" He laughed out loud. "That's the funniest thing I've heard in a long time." "You gotta be kidding me," Shikamaru muttered as he looked up towards the sky. He scratched his head in annoyance before turning and heading back to the main street. "Whatever. Let's just go and try to find something to eat before we run out of time." Choji followed him with tears in the corners of his eyes and a slight sniffle at the loss of his chips. It took him a moment, but Shikamaru noticed that Hinata was not following him. Instead, she stood in front of the boy, biting her lips slightly and looking nervously at the ground. "Hinata? What's up?" She stood there in front of the pickpocket, trying to find the words she wanted to say. "Have I seen you somewhere before?" His eyes widened slightly in surprise as he looked up at her before quickly reverting to his agitated self. "Nah." Hinata stepped back a bit, surprised and confused by his answer to her question. She was certain that there was something familiar about this boy, but she couldn't quite place it. Shikamaru and Choji were not flanking her as they walked back to hear the conversation. "Are you sure? Do you frequent back alleys?" "And no." "Then we haven't met," the boy grumbled as he stood up in front of them. He wiped some dirt off his pants and took the tissue paper out of his nose before turning and walking down the alley. He waved a hand at them as he left. "Anyway, I'm outta here." "Wait a second," Shikamaru called out to him. He stopped quickly and faced Shikamaru, wondering what he wanted. "What's your name?" "Michio?" the bandaged boy admitted. Shikamaru was less that convinced that was really his name. "Hinata said that something was weird about your chakra. Are you okay?" Yeah. I am fine," Michio replied with a nervous energy in his voice. "Anyway, gotta go." Troublesome Shikamaru sighed before turning to leave, Choji following his best friend. Hinata bit her lip and looked as if she wanted to say something else, but instead just bowed her head quickly and then followed the other 2. They were nearly out of the alleyway when they heard the sound of someone landing behind them and a muffled shout from Michio. They turned around quickly, and their eyes widened in shock and fear. Standing there covering Michio's mouth was an Umbu with the red marking of a kitsune on his mask. Then, just as quickly as he appeared, they both disappeared in a swirl of leaves, leaving nothing in his trace. The 3 walked down the hall quietly, each lost in their own thoughts as they recalled the event from less than 10 minutes ago. They had decided immediately after to just head back to the academy, having all lost their appetite in the shock of the event. "What do you think is going to happen to Michio?" Choji whispered to the 2 as they entered the empty classroom. "I'm sure he's fine," Shikamaru said, trying to reassure Choji, and himself, at the same time. But isn't it a major crime to steal from a shinobi?" Hinata questioned as they all sat down. Shikamaru gritted his teeth at the thought. He had secretly hoped that neither of them knew that piece of information about Konoha law. Stealing from a shinobi was a major crime in any village, simply because of the chance the shinobi might have been carrying some kind of critical information. Ninjas are naturally more relaxed in their home villages, so if someone were to manage to steal information from a ninja carrying information to the Hokage, it could be disastrous. "We're just genin though. I mean, what could we possibly have?" Choji tried to reason. "That doesn't matter," Shikamaru muttered out. "Genin are sometimes used to run important documents from one part of the village to another. There's no real danger, so there's no problem with the genin making the run. With the law in place, most people would never dare even consider stealing from one of us." Still, he will be alright, right?" Hinata asked meekly, looking at the 2 pleadingly. They looked away uncomfortably from her gaze, either of their expressions being very reassuring. Slowly, other students were starting to file into the classroom around them. Soon the room was almost full of genin anxious to hear who their new sensei would be. "I don't know," Choji whispered out as he took nervous glances around him. "You've heard the rumors about that demon shinobi, right? They say he's the reborn Kyuubi." "That's not what I heard." The 3 were startled out of their conversation when Kiba turned around in his chair from below them. Apparently, Choji wasn't quite quiet enough for the Inuzuka to not hear their conversation. "I heard he just worships the Kyuubi and draws strength from him. and to get that power he must sacrifice a virgin every full moon. That's just stupid. Sacrificing a virgin is way too cult. Ino spoke out as the whole class started getting involved in the conversation. I heard he gets his power by eating the hearts of everyone he kills, but sometimes he thirsts for the taste too. So he uses criminals to satisfy his needs. I heard he once killed a Chunin for accidentally running into him. I heard he stands over 6 feet tall and is as wide as 2 men. My dad said he once mutilated over 50 people during an assassination mission using only an arm that he ripped off his first victim as a weapon. Shikamaru's scowl just deepened as the whole class had joined in on the topic, each one having some crazy story related to a man that just snatched up a person right in front of his eyes. He could see that Hinata seemed incredibly confused and worried by all the gossips, while Choji was listening to the stories turn more and more insane. Hinata looked at her 2 new teammates, confused. A year ago, father said that the demon shinobi was an incredibly strong fighter that deserved our respect. And that all these things said about him are lies. Apparently the rest of the class was too concentrated in their own stories to hear the quiet girl speak her mind, which Shikamaru was thankful for in all honesty. If one of them heard her speak up in defense for the demon, who knows what could have been said. My dad never talks about him, but I have heard all these rumors too. Shikamaru was starting to get a migraine from all the students talking so loudly around them. But he did tell me that usually all lies are at least 1 grain of truth. So who knows, but it's all too troublesome to worry about, since we will probably never find out the truth. I know the really strong thing is true though. Choji pitched in with what little true info he did know. I remember my dad say that he has one of the higher bounties in Konoha on his head. So he has to be really strong. Whatever. Shikamaru muttered as he put his head down on the desk in front of him and attempted to block out all the noise in the classroom. Choji looked depressed that the conversation was ending already but knew that this was just Shikamaru's personality. It wasn't long though until Irika and Mizuki came in to see all the students talking to each other noisily. Alright, what's all this about? Irika yelled out. Normally, most students were quiet when it came time for them to find out who their teachers would be since they were nervous, but this group was clearly more interested in something else. What do you think, Irika-sensei? Does he get his power by worshipping the demon or by eating the hearts of his victims? One of the girls yelled out. Irika felt more confused than he ever had in his entire life. Who? The demon shinobi, of course. Several people yelled out at once, and instantly Irika's eyes widened in understanding before quickly turning into a scowl at the students. Irika cursed his luck that this type of conversation between the students would have to start now if all times, when the person himself would be showing up any minute to pick up his own batch of students. Enough of that. Do you really think that you all should be focusing on thoughtless rumors rather than concentrating on finding out who the teacher of your group is going to be? His words had the desired effect as the students quickly sobered up, remembering why they were there and the world they were about to enter. Of course, Irika had heard the same types of rumors that all the children had heard, including the ones he thought were insane, and those that could hold some truth. The difference was that he had heard the rumors from shinobi along with those from the civilian population. Most rumors in the shinobi community had to do with his level of strength, and how he had so quickly risen in the bingo book. Some of the higher-ranking ninja held some measure of respect for him, so it was mostly those ranked lower that had some sort of spite for the person. The civilians were entirely different though. They were completely spite-filled and demeaning, talking about how he had obtained his power through evil means or murdered innocents for fun. Many of the rumors were completely ridiculous, but they did their job in breeding hate and suspicion of the man. Irika had been taught that at least one small part of every lie is truth. He could only hope that the truth was that the people who started these rumors were simply very afraid. Now then, Irika shouted out, deciding to leave his troubling thoughts for later. I'll start listing off the sensei for each team, and then that group will leave with them as soon as they come to pick you up. Now then, Team 1. It was about the point that Shikamaru decided that he would just tune out Irika's talking until it came time for his team's turn. What would the point be in hearing what sensei every team had? Nothing, that's what, so obviously it didn't involve him. I hope we get a good sensei, Choji whispered to the two. Shikamaru gave a quick grunt of agreement. He could see Hinata nod her head slightly in agreement, but that was the only real conversation between the three as the names were listed off and different jounin entered the room and left with their teams. Everything seemed rather routine until the name was read off for Team 7. Team 7's sensei is Hatake Kakashi. Irika looked up from his clipboard at the three students sitting near each other with an annoyed and sorry look on his face. Sorry, but Kakashi-san is usually late to these types of things. So you will probably be waiting a little while. Shikamaru sat up and looked to the front of the classroom with probably the most attention he had ever given anything during his time at the academy. His teammates both sat up a little straighter as well. They knew their turn was coming now, and their future was about to be put in the hands of the person about to come through the door. Team 10 Sensei is Naruto. Like the ramen topping? Shikamaru muttered out as some of the nervousness in his body left him. I like him already, Choji commented happily with a smile. The smile didn't last very long though, as the door at the front of the classroom slid open and a cloaked figure walked through. Gasps were heard all around the classroom, and several girls passed out in a fright as the figure of all their gossip walked through the door. Shikamaru, Choji, and Hinata's mouths were open in shock as the demon shinobi of Konoha stood in front of their class looking directly at them. Team 10. You're with me, he yelled out happily. Naruto could feel the stares he was getting as he paced back and forth in the large classroom where the sensei were waiting before collecting their teams. How old is he? This can't possibly be the demon. Why was he allowed to make the teams? The Hokage called him Naruto. He could hear the whispers all around him. He had entered the room later than everyone else, hoping that he could limit the time among his new peers as much as possible. Well, later than everyone except for Kakashi, he thought. He knew the moment he entered the room that he would be the focus of the conversation and that his presence would be met with both animosity and curiosity. His experience among his fellow Konoha shinobi had been limited to working with the clan heads and his time with the ANBU. His time with ANBU went well and he enjoyed interacting with people that he had not been training with his whole life, but it was still business with the ANBU that were not Kakashi. He had never interacted with anyone in this room besides Kurenai, and that first interaction was last night. I doubt she would want anything to do with me right now, Naruto thought as he glanced at the woman sitting at one of the desks. She wasn't shooting glares or gossiping about him, but she sure as hell looked like she did not want to give him the time of day. Naruto didn't really have time for worrying about them right now anyway. Naruto was feeling something he hadn't felt in a while. Nervous. He was pacing back and forth while squeezing his hands together as he did. He had tried standing still earlier, but when he did that his foot just tapped constantly with all the pent-up energy that he was feeling. I am sure that they would all be laughing at me if they saw me like this. Naruto scowled under his mask at the thought of his senseis reacting to his current state. Some sensei would think this is Hyler Dash. Demon! Naruto was brought out of his thoughts by the booming voice of a jounin that was currently marching up to him. He wore navy blue cargo pants with a tight black shirt under his standard issue vest. His forehead protector was wrapped around his bicep instead of right below his shortly cropped brown hair. He had almost 2 feet of height on Naruto as towered right in front of him. What do you think you're doing here, demon? He growled. My name is Naruto, crossing his arms across his chest as he answered. And I am here to pick up my students like everyone else here. You're not let everyone else here, demon. Naruto, he interrupted, but the jounin just kept going. You are a cold-blooded killer that praises the beast that nearly destroyed us. These kids don't need to be learning from someone like you. I don't know what the Hokage was thinking. First off, Naruto announced, lifting one arm and one finger up while keeping the other crossed. You don't know anything about me or my motivations. He was aware of the small crowd that started to gather around and listen to the confrontation. He had learned long ago from his teachers and his experience in the ANBU that diplomacy was sometimes the best option, but backing down from a fool like this would only hurt his reputation in the future. I am not going to apologize to anyone for doing my job. My team worked together and performed our duties to the best of our ability. He moved his one finger to point up to his kitsune mask. And this mask is supposed to be a symbol of us moving past the attack and not being held back by it. That's bulls. Second, Naruto raised his voice, the Hokage doesn't have to explain a thing to you. The man bristled at the last statement, with his fist clenching and his eyebrow twitching at the manner he was bespoken to. Being talked down to by a ninja half his size, bruising his ego. Listen here, demon. Naruto retorted with a condescending tone at each syllable. Do you need me to spell it out for you? He reared back his fist to strike down on the masked boy. Knock it off, Tsubasa. His fist stopped before it even started its descent as he glanced over to the side. Kurenai still sat at the desk she was at previously. Her red eyes stared intently at the jounin whose hand was still in the air. The Hokage made his decision and Naruto-san gets his team, she replied with a cold tone. TCH, the jounin Naruto now knew as Tsubasa scoffed as he turned to walk away. Whatever, they are about to start calling teams anyway. If it wasn't for the mask on his face, everyone would have seen the confused look on Naruto's face. Probably best to avoid her for a while. He thought to himself before shaking his head. Nah. He shot Kurenai a large thumb up with a pose. He was rewarded with her eyebrow twitching in anger before she rolled her eyes and looked away. Naruto chuckled to himself in amusement at the response. Team 1, your sensei is Onaga Tsubasa. Naruto heard over the small intercom in the classroom that was activated to let the jounins know when to approach the classroom. The large man shot a quick glare back at Naruto before exiting the classroom to pick up his students. One by one, teachers left to go pick up their new charges, each one getting a few minutes to walk in and collect their team before the next announcement from Irika. It didn't take long for him to become the last one left in the room. Okay, Naruto, you got this. He psyched himself up. You have led plenty of teams before. You are a great leader. You are gonna be the best damn sensei Konoha has ever had. Team 10 sensei is Naruto. Let's do this. For some reason, Choji had felt excited when he heard the name of his new sensei. He didn't necessarily relate his new sensei's name directly to the delicious fish cake that he enjoyed when getting ramen, but it certainly wasn't the most intimidating name he had ever heard. It mattered more to him to get a sensei that would be nice and teach him how to be an effective shinobi. Like the ramen topping? He heard Shikamaru mutter. I like him already. Choji commented happily with a smile to Shikamaru's comment. That was when the door of the classroom slid open and Choji felt his stomach drop. It was him. The object of their discussion from before the teams started getting announced and snatched away, the boy who stole from his new team was walking through the door. A dark black cloak covered up all his features except for one thing, a kitsune mask. His mask was pure white for the base color. A small canine-like snout distended from the area that his mouth would be located with black paint to mark a nose and a dark red outlining where the lips would be. The two eye holes for the mask were surrounded by black paint shaped like eyes of a predator and outlined in red. Two sharp strokes of red on each cheek that started wide on the outside of the mask and became sharper before ending under his eyes. Two small fox-like ears sat atop the mask with a red triangle being in the center of ear to add dimension. He never took his eyes off him as he walked to the front of the classroom from the door. He heard muffled gasps from the students that were still waiting for a sensei to pick them up, and he was pretty sure he heard a few thuds, but he couldn't pry his eyes away to check what the noise was. He could feel his heart beating rapidly in his chest. Team 10. You're with me. There was perhaps a little bit of hope that the ANBU wasn't here to pick up a team and was instead delivering a message to Irika, but that hope was dashed. Choji felt glued to his seat, and he noticed that neither Shikamaru nor Hinata had moved as well. He glanced at Shikamaru with pleading eyes. What do we do? The Anbu he now knew as Naruto shouted. Let's go! Team 10 looked between each other before slowly rising out of their chairs as one. The sound of their chairs scraping backwards seemed impossibly loud in the silent classroom as they all left their spots and started trudging down the stairs towards their new sensei. He could feel the eyes of Team 7 and some of the other remaining students who had not yet left. Guys, seriously. He heard his new sensei whine. It's not a funeral procession. The tone of voice caught Choji off guard some and almost made him stumble down the stairs in surprise. A good thing he caught himself, or he could have sent his whole team crashing down to the floor in an embarrassing tumble. He had every right to be surprised though, as the voice of his sensei was not something he would have associated with the Konoha urban legend before him. He didn't hear it before when Naruto first yelled his greeting or the command for them to come down, but the whiny voice from before sounded like someone around his age. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, he made another discovery as he really looked at the shinobi before him. Irika was standing only a few feet away, but the difference was clear. Irika-sensei is almost a foot taller than him. He glanced to his side at Shikamaru and noticed that he was only slightly shorter than their new sensei. Is he our age? Great, Naruto spoke. Meet me on the school rooftop as quick as you can. With that, he disappeared in a plume of smoke, leaving behind a stunned classroom full of questions. Could that have gone any worse? The frustrated shout escaped him as he arrived on the rooftop of the school. He knew that he only had a few minutes before his team arrived, but he had to get that out of his system before he could compose himself. Seriously, someone passed out. He threw his arms up in frustration. He knew the gossip around town surrounding him. The interaction with Tsubasa earlier was proof enough about the feelings that a majority of the village had with his persona, but he had at least hoped that a classroom full of clan heirs and wannabe shinobi would have some self-control, or at the very least the ability to look at things for themselves, make their own judgments. The reaction of his new team had been worse than he expected though. He could see it based off their reactions that they were genuinely frightened to see him appear in front of them. Their depressed walk and sullen march when their names were announced only further convinced him of that. He was really starting to regret his little stunt during lunchtime. Maybe I pushed that a little bit too far. Originally, he had not planned to go down and snatch Michio from in front of the young genin, but at the last second the mischievous idea popped into his head, and he just acted on it. Now he was starting to regret the stunt, and wished that he had taken a more Shikaka-like approach and stuck to the plan. Maybe I should have just done the bell test like Dad. He pouted slightly at the thought. The bell test was a better option for teams that may have some antagonistic elements in them and force them to figure out the true meaning behind the test. It was not the best test for teams like his that would likely either figure out the truth behind the test rather quickly or give up bells to their teammates. Based on what I have seen, they would have probably debated for hours about who should get the bells and kept trying to pass it off to each other, though they would probably have figured out the real test before they even got the bells. Before he could finish his musing, he heard steps starting to come up the stairs that led up to the rooftop. In the blink of an eye, Naruto was now leaning against the guardrail of the roof, trying to look as relaxed as possible. The three entered the rooftop hesitantly at first as they glanced around. Once they spotted Naruto against the rail, they paused for only a moment before proceeding the rest of the way over to where he was standing. Naruto took a moment to observe them up close, better than he had the previous days from a distance. Shikamaru's hair was brown and pulled back into a tight spiky ponytail that looked a lot like his father's. In fact, he looked a lot like a better-kept version of his father. No doubt due to his mom's influence. He wore a gray jacket with green edges sleeves and the Nara family symbol on the back. His shirt was green and made up of a mesh wire armor that was both flexible and durable. He wore brown pants that stopped a little below his knees, and a kunai pouch was wrapped around his right leg. His forehead protector was also tied around the sleeve of his left arm, and Naruto could see his wore the same silver earrings that his father wore. Choji was wearing a green short-sleeved haori over a white shirt with the kanji for food on it. He wore black shorts with a kunai holder wrapped around his right thigh. His hands up to his elbows and ankles up to his knee were wrapped in bandages to protect his skin from hard impacts. Possibly the most interesting parts of his outfit though were his hoop earrings, his forehead protector that had been styled to allow tall tufts of his hair to poke out on each side, and a long white scarf wrapped around his neck. Hinata was wearing a cream-colored hooded jacket with the symbol of the Hyuga stitched on the upper sleeves. The jacket also had fur around the cuffs and the hem. Her pants were navy blue and ended just above her ankles. He noticed that she wore her forehead protector tied around her neck. She had a fairer complexion than the one he saw on her father, but she had indigo-colored hair that Naruto attributed to her mother. I have only seen her picture in Hayashi-sensei's study. Naruto thought sadly. He had no memories of ever meeting the girl's mother before she had passed away after the birth of her younger sister. The memory of his training session with Hayashi after his wife's death was not pleasant in the slightest. Naruto shook his head quickly to rid himself of the memory and focus on the present as his students reached him. As he leaned back on the rail, he jumped up slightly to sit his rear on the railing behind him before gesturing to some planter boxes with numerous vegetables that sat on top of the rooftop location. The team took the hint quickly and sat down on the edges of the boxes. Okay. Let's start with some introductions. Naruto spoke excitedly. Why don't you guys tell me your likes, dislikes, hobbies, dreams, and anything else you might like the team to know? The three preteens looked between one another to see who would start first. There was a nervous energy radiating off the three that he could easily read. Naruto was definitely regretting the actions he took at lunchtime with the team in front of him. How about I start? Naruto chuckled slightly as he tried to break the tension. My name is Naruto. I like ramen, training, and gardening. I dislike the 3 minutes it takes to cook cup ramen, and people that judge others before getting to know them. Naruto noticed the young genin flinch slightly at this comment. I already said that my hobby is gardening. And my dream, he leaned forward slightly as the three sat on the edges of their seats in anticipation, is to become the greatest Hokage ever, believe it? All three students nearly fell out of their seats as their jaws dropped open and eyes went wide. Naruto chuckled nervously and scratched at the back of his head through his cloak. He also admonished himself slightly about his verbal tick coming out at the end of his declaration. He had been working on keeping his use of databeo to a minimal level during his training. His training taught him that it wasn't always appropriate depending on this situation, but sometimes it would slip out when he was nervous or excited. Hayashi would usually shake his head in disapproval whenever he heard it, but also smile slightly about it. Why don't you go next? Naruto pointed to Shikamaru when he noticed the boy was the first to recover from the shock and take on a serious expression. Right. Shikamaru started. My name is Nara Shikamaru. I like shogi and watching clouds. I dislike anything troublesome and people that pick on others. I don't have any real hobbies. My dream is to become a chunin that can support myself and live a life where nothing too good or bad happens, and then pass away peacefully. What kind of a dream is that? He was suddenly grateful for the mask that covered his face, or else they would see his pained expression and his eyebrow twitching. He turned his gaze to Choji next. My name is Akimichi Choji. The poor boy stuttered slightly under the gaze his new sensei. I like chips, barbecue, and shikamaru. I dislike when I run out of chips and when people insult me. My hobbies are trying different foods and hanging out with my friends. My dream is to head my clan and find a wife that loves to cook. Just like him. Naruto smiled under his mask. He reminded Naruto a lot of his father Choza. The large man had trained Naruto with methods to temper the strength of his body. Not just in his conditioning training, but Naruto also learned that he was the main instigator in modifying Naruto's diet and nutrition. The head of the Akimichi had a lot of knowledge on how the body functioned and experience with the medicinal effects of their clan's pills. His gaze drifted over to the last member of the team. She shrank down in her coat slightly at the attention now being focused on her by the team, but she looked to be trying to steal her courage. And my name is Hyuga Hinata. She paused for a second looking frustrated. I like sweets and my mother's garden. I dislike some things about my clan. And my hobbies are sea cooking and pressing flowers. My dream is uniting my clan and to abolish certain practices. Naruto's head cocked to the side a little as he stared at Hinata. The other two boys seemed to be strongly influenced their parents, but Hinata seemed to be the opposite. Hayashi had always been stoic and confident in his actions, but Hinata was timid and nervous when she spoke. Perhaps she took more after her mother? The only thing that she had said without stuttering was that her dream was to unite her clan, and, if he was guessing correctly, to get rid of the caged bird seal. Noble goals, but not something she would be able to accomplish with the demeanor she was showing right now. But maybe the reason she was acting like this was because she was afraid of him right now. Naruto frowned at the thought that his actions earlier may have scared his new pupils worse than he realized. His reputation was working against him right now. It wasn't. Well, it's nice to meet you all. Naruto was sure that his nervousness was rolling off him in waves. He could also tell that they were just as anxious about everything as he was. He would not be able to create an environment where trust could start to be built in an environment like this. Shibi-sensei would say that it is best to take a step back and determine the correct questions to answer the correct problem. Listen, Naruto sighed out. His team stared at him in anticipation. I understand that this is not what you were expecting. Choji was nodding his head quickly. I am sure you guys have a lot of questions. Shikamaru nodded his head. And would like a chance to regroup your nerves. Hinata nodded her head. So let's do this. Naruto clapped his hands and stood off the railing he had been sitting on. Let's break here for today. I want you to take the rest of the day to gather your thoughts. Tomorrow we will meet at Training Ground 10 at 7 and ready to take a test. After that I will answer all the questions that I am able to. A swirl of leaves and the cloaked figure was gone, leaving behind three young teens now questioning what their future held. I don't like this. Shikamaru was a self-proclaimed lazy ass. He put the amount of effort into everything that he did to be completely average because that was his goal. Going beyond the standard not only meant that he would be working harder, but also bringing higher expectations on himself from others. Every subject during the academy was given just a passing grade, never exemplary, and that was how he wanted it. He knew what people thought of him when it came to the attitude he went about life and the effort that he put into his tasks. The comments or annoyances that came from others did not bother him in the slightest because he knew that worrying about such things was more troublesome than not. He also knew that one of the things that could make him not act like that was for a puzzle or mystery that he couldn't immediately solve to make it way in front of him. Most subjects bored him too much to pay attention to at the academy, and most problems he could glance at and determine if finding the answer was worth the effort or not. So, when something that would come along that he couldn't figure out right away, but he knew was worth the effort, it would always take up a spot in his mind. After that I will answer all the questions that I am able to. That sentence bothered him immensely after his sensei spoke it. His scowl was in full force after those words came out and his new teacher used the body flicker technique to travel away so quickly. He wasn't sure if his new teammates also picked up on the language. By saying able to, there was an implication that there were questions he was not allowed to answer. If he had said, he would answer all of the questions he can answer, it could have implied that the answer may just not have been known to him. Instead, his new sensei had now added another layer of mystery onto his new situation. A situation that was starting to spiral to a place that he wasn't comfortable with. Troublesome. First, his prediction on his new team didn't come true when Hinata was assigned to the team instead of Ino. Not an entirely unwelcome change to what he expected to happen, but there was so much history behind his parents and their combination techniques that he expected it to continue. Their parents had become a legendary combination during the previous wars and had recorded the most successful mission completion percentage for a shinobi team for many years. It made sense to him for the Hokage and the academic instructors to want to replicate that success. He was already accepting of the fact that things would be different that he expected after their little adventure during their lunch. Hinata seemed far easier to communicate and work with during this short chase than he imagined the blonde that he had known since earlier in his childhood would have been. If not for the sudden shock of his new sensei dropping in and snatching the young thief that they had chased, he believed that the experience would have been a positive bonding experience for the new team. But that was the new problem that was now invading his mind. The announcement of the new sensei and his entrance into the classroom was a shock to the system for the young Nara, and clearly his new teammates felt the same way. Once his shock went away and he was able to think clearly as they walked down the stairs to their new teacher, he was able to make a number of observations that only added on to the mystery of the Kitsune masked Anbu that had been the subject of conversation right before the team announcements began. Shikamaru was familiar with a number of jonin in Konoha. His father was the overall jonin commander for the shinobi forces of Konoha after all. He couldn't help overhearing his father discussing arrangements and missions with his subordinates that would visit his father's home office on some nights. Shikamaru wasn't really trying to learn anything about these people, but he couldn't really help the information that his brain would retain. As a result, he at least knew the names of any jonin in their hidden village that were considered worth knowing. And the name Naruto had never once been mentioned in the presence of Shikamaru. So, at the front of their classroom had stood his new jonin sensei whose name he had never heard, with a height that was similar to his own and a voice that lacked the deepness and maturity of an older person. And then as Shikamaru walked down the stairs, his new sensei complained about their pace down the stairs with what almost sounded like he was whining. He did not match any of the descriptions that had been used to describe him. He didn't have much time to contemplate the situation before Naruto had used the body flicker technique to vanish out of the classroom with their instructions to get to the rooftop as quickly as they could. The rooftop meeting did nothing to alleviate the questions that were running through his mind. They had rushed up to the top in fear of the possible consequences of being late, but found that their teacher was relaxing against the rail, seemingly not concerned by their pace. He had waited patiently for them to come over, sit down, and he even began introductions when they hesitated. Is to become the greatest Hokage ever, believe it? The introduction and declaration at the end had honestly shocked Shikamaru. There was no way he could have ever associated the demon shinobi with someone that enjoyed gardening and eating ramen. Then when he said that he disliked being judged, it caused his team to flinch in guilt, but that guilt had started to wear off almost immediately for the dark-haired Nara boy. When his sole understanding of the demon shinobi's existence had been through dark rumors and one experience where their sensei literally snatched someone their age right off the street. It was hard not having a preconceived opinion on the man that sat in front of him. But when the young Anbu mentioned his dream was when the Nara's jaw fully dropped in disbelief. It just didn't make sense. The Hokage position was not just a position of power that the strongest person would fill. The Hokage wasn't just a political position that would be filled by the person with the best connections and ideas to move Konoha forward into the future. Both of those things were very important to the decision-making process, but if anything, Hokage was also a ceremonial position. It was supposed to be someone who represented the will of fire, and that of the people the best. There was just no way for someone to become a Kage without the support and respect of the people in the village that they served. Shikamaru had never spoken with his new sensei before, but that didn't mean that he had never heard how others spoke about his sensei. Around the town he was always spoken of with disdain by both shinobi and civilian alike. Discussion of him wasn't a taboo subject that people would try to hide and prevent others from hearing. It was an ongoing topic in the social circles of Konoha. The demon shinobi would sometimes be brought up in conversations if he was spotted around town, but he was most talked about whenever the new bingo books were released every few months. It was extremely rare for an Anbu to be put into the bingo books. Shinobi that became Anbu typically did not expect those to be their permanent positions. The masks that they wore would usually be passed down to the new recruits that would replace the veteran that had either moved on to a new position, or more commonly had fallen in the line of duty. The anonymity and rotation of these positions were one factor that typically kept their members out of the bingo book. Another factor was that the nature of Anbu missions were typically considered classified and considered stealth operations. They should not be getting famous from their missions because no one should know about them. Instead, the demon shinobi had become famous for being a special operations member that didn't take those kinds of missions. He had become famous because he took missions that required a more direct approach like the types that Jonin took, but he still wore the mask. It was a sore spot for the village. Most of the shinobi population did not like watching the Kitsune masked Anbu take missions that were typically reserved for them. Civilians didn't like seeing someone rising in fame while also sporting a mask that they felt was insult. It was a stain on the reputation of the village. How could he hope to become Hokage in a village that scorns him? Shikamaru frowned as he walked through the gate that marked the entrance to the Nara clan district. His family home was settled on the outskirts of the east in Konoha, in a corner where the great walls of Konoha and the cliff face that their village was built into. Their territory was larger than most would have assumed for the modestly populated clan. This was because of the large, forested section of their district that served as the land occupied by the deer that his family was named after and cared for. His clan was deeply connected to the nature, and it showed in as he walked down the center path of their district towards his home. Shikamaru glanced up at the canopy of leaves above his head as the trees that lined the main path provided a dense shade. The roots of these trees spread out and crossing the road at different intervals. To some it would be considered annoying, but to his family it was natural. He glanced to his sides at the homes that stood amongst the trees. His family preferred their homes to be designed in a way that did not stand out at all from the forest that surrounded them. The trees of the forest served as the main building material for the homes that lined the pathway, and the small areas that were painted were always done with deep greens or dark browns. The natural feel of still being in nature was part of the reason the roadway was livelier than one might expect. Animals would use the pathway just as often as human travelers as they walked through the area. Konoha was the village hidden in the leaf, but there was no other residential district like this one. Just down the path nearly at the front of his own home, Shikamaru could see one of his family's oldest deer walking the way towards him. He smiled slightly as they both stood in front of one another and looked each other in the eyes. The animal's eyes held a depth and wisdom that made Shikamaru question if it could understand the turmoil that had been the young clan heir's thoughts for the past half hour that he had walked home. Then the deer bowed in front of him and Shikamaru returned the gesture before stepping to the side to allow the elder deer to pass by without obstruction. Once the deer was past him, Shikamaru continued to the steps of his family home and entered quietly before taking off his shoes. He made his way through his homes, living as silently as he could, to not alert his mother of his arrival yet, and made his way to the exterior veranda that wrapped around his family's courtyard. They had a small koi pond in the center of the courtyard with a small flower bed that added some color to the more natural colors that surrounded them. The shogi doors that surrounded them were painted with the images of regal deer and sakura trees that were experiencing blossoming. Besides sleeping in his own room, this was by far his favorite place to be in his home. Shikamaru couldn't help the small frown that came to his face as he looked over at the shogi door that was connected to his father's office. The veranda that surrounded the courtyard was connected to every main room in his house. There at the end his father's shogi door was slid open and Shikamaru could see his father Shikaku smirking at him through the door. Realization washed over Shikamaru as he knew why his father was sending him that smirk. Of course he knew the whole time about the Jonin assigned to Team 10 and had been expecting Shikamaru to come with questions. It was as if his father was playing shogi while already knowing the first two moves. TCH. Shikamaru grunted in annoyance as he walked into the clan head's office and unceremoniously flopped himself down on the floor in a relaxed seated position. The whole time his dad had kept that knowing grin on his face that was currently annoying him to no end. I knew becoming a genin makes you an adult, but I didn't expect you to suddenly look like you aged multiple years. Shikaku joked at his stressed out son. Shikamaru frowned but didn't go further for fear of goading his father on. So his father settled his elbow on his knee and rested his chin in the palm of his hand. How did it go? Shikamaru let out a long sigh and let his body roll down till he lied on his back. He told the story of his surprise at the team announcements, the thief that stole from them and led them on a chase through the village, their encounter with the Kitsune Mastambu, the stories in the classroom, and finally this new sensei and their introductions. At first Shikaku had worn a grin on his face through the first half of his son's tale, but slowly it had turned into an almost deadpan face. By the end of his tale the elder Nara had his palm covering his face in disbelief. I can't believe he screwed up this bad, Shikaku whispered so quietly that Shikamaru barely heard it. Who is he? Shikaku's eyes focused on his son from between the fingers that were on his face. He is your new sensei. That's not what I mean. I want to know. I know what you want to know. The Jonin stopped him. If I could answer all your questions I would, but for now you are going to have to be patient. Your sensei said that he has a test for you tomorrow and then it sounds like you can ask your questions after you pass. Will he even answer all of them? Shikamaru countered. No. Shikaku quickly raised a hand to stop his son from arguing. There are things he is not allowed to say and believe me when I say that if he could tell you that he would. Shikamaru still didn't look happy, but some of the stress seemed to be ebbed off his face slightly. You should be more worried about the test tomorrow, however. Shikamaru raised his eyebrow at his dad as he sat back up from his laying position. What do you mean? Heh. Sounds like he didn't explain it, but tradition is that the Jonin sensei gives a test that will determine if they believe that the genin are worthy, or they can send them back to the academy for remedial training. Shikaku's smirk returned to his face as he watched the color drain from his son's face. There's a 66% failure rate. Shikamaru groaned but stood up and started to make his way out of the study and to somewhere more relaxing before dinner and dealing with his mother. He paused when he reached the threshold to the outside. Do you trust him? I trust him with my son's life. The sound of falling chopsticks crashing into a bowl snapped Choji's attention to that of his mother. He had simply been staring into his bowl of food when his mother asked him about his new team. What did you say? His mother's attitude caught Choji off guard and made him even more nervous about the whole situation. My sensei is Naruto the demon shinobi. His mother Fusey was a full-figured woman with short black hair and eyes, the latter of which had orange makeup around the outside edge for decoration. She wore a purple dress with gold trim on it. Choji couldn't see it from where he was, but he knew that she also wore the kanji for food on her back like the rest of his clan. The look of shock that she wore on his face was making Choji feel worse and worse about the situation. Gossip was going around the market today that his name was Naruto. His mother talked more to herself than anything. Then realization seemed to strike her as she rounded her full attention to his father. You knew! Why didn't you tell me? Now, Fusey-chan. His father pleaded with both hands raised in front of himself. He had changed out of his family's traditional red armor when he went out of the house and instead was dressed in a dark red yukata that matched the same color as his long mane-like hair. His father was a giant of a man even before using his family techniques, but his mother always had the ability to shrink him down in moments like this. Don't you, Fusey-chan, me? How could you not tell me that they were putting my baby on a team with him? And poor Shikamaru too. His mother had always been a kind and caring woman, but she was also fiercely protective of those that she cared about. Choji could safely say that his direct family was in that category, but his best friend Shikamaru was also one of the ones his mother also acted this way about. Honey, I am sure. No! We are going to see the Hokage right after we finish dinner, and we are going to. Slam! Choji and his mother jumped in shock as his father's large hand slapped the table in front of them. We will do no such thing, Choza announced with a finality that Choji was unfamiliar with hearing. His parents hardly ever argued about anything, but whenever they did his mother would always come out the victor. He knew that his mother was a fierce woman that hardly ever backed down, but even she was caught off guard by large Akimichi's reaction. Choza, she started, but felt the words die in her throat at the stern look her husband was giving. As quickly as the look was there, it was gone again, and his pop's more relaxed and happier demeanor had returned. Choji released a breath that he didn't know he had been holding. The rumors that you have heard about him around the markets and shops are nothing to concern yourself about. Young Naruto will make a fine teacher. Choza spoke as he began to pick up his chopsticks once again and continue his meal. Young? His mother questioned. Yeah, Mom. Choji answered for his father. I don't know how old he is exactly, but he's about the same height as Shikamaru. He sounds like he can't be much older than we are. Actually, you are older than he is. His father answered, then paused his eating as he furrowed his eyebrows and thought. Maybe I shouldn't have told you that. Seriously? His mother stammered out. The demon shinobi is younger than our Choji-kun? Yes. He could see his father was rubbing his chin in thought as if debating how to best approach the subject. He adopted a serious expression, but Choji did not feel the same ferocity that was directed towards his mother earlier. You need to keep this to yourself for now. Information regarding him is considered a strict secret, and I could get in trouble for revealing too much. Choji's eyes widened in fear at thought of his father getting into trouble. His father was always such a kind and caring man. The thought of him being punished for information as small as learning Naruto's age was unthinkable. It gripped his heart with fear. Don't worry so much. His father chuckled, trying to relax his family. I am sure everything will be coming out soon enough anyway. He did say that we could ask questions tomorrow after we took a test. Oh, did he? Choza pondered with an amused smile. Well, I am sure he will answer everything he can if you pass his test. That's true, Fusey announced with a hopeful voice and clapped her hands together. He may not even be that team after tomorrow. This time Choji dropped his chopsticks as they fell from his suddenly weak hands. His father was scowling at his suddenly hopeful-looking mother. What do you mean? Your mother just let out a nice little secret about the genin exams. His father's accusatory tone seemed to snap his mother out of whatever mood she was in. She looked at both parties a little guiltily. His father sighed out in frustration. The Jonin sensei are responsible to perform another test with their team to determine if they are ready to handle their new roles. Those that failed either go back for some remedial training before trying again, or they move on to civilian life. Choji gulped at the prospect of going back for remedial training at the academy. He had never heard of this before and highly doubted that many people went through the remedial training. It would be especially embarrassing for a clan heir to be put through that sort of situation. Probably the kind of thing that a clan like the Hyuga would remove the heir status from someone for. And you dear. Choza looked at his suddenly bashful wife. Clearly his mom was embarrassed by her earlier outburst. You sounded a little too happy at the prospect of our son failing to be on Naruto's team. I don't like hearing that the gossip of the village has also influenced your opinion on our son's new sensei. I would hope that you would trust me to not let Choji be put into a bad situation. His mother blushed and looked down at the table. I understand, husband. I worry for our son. I know most of the Jonin in the village and have never spoken with him. You have also never mentioned him before. All I can go by are those horrible rumors. I understand your fears. Just please trust me on this. Choza's tone had become softer after his wife's fearful confession. He will prove to be a fine person once we get to know him. That's it, Fusey proclaimed excitedly. The father and son pair just looked at each other questioningly, either knowing what the female Akimichi was referring to. We need to get to know him. What? What? Choji-kun. Invite him to dinner, she exclaimed. I want to meet my son's sensei and get a read on him for myself. Choji was dumbfounded by the direction the conversation had gone. He said he likes ramen? Choza just groaned and mentioned something about the clan's coffers taking a hit. Irika glanced around him as the street lamps started to flicker to life along the road that walked. The sun had started to set not long after Irika had left the Hokage Tower and started towards a familiar, but unexpected destination. He couldn't help but wonder what he was walking into. Flashback. His knuckles were paused just inches from the large wooden doors. He was very accustomed to knocking on the oaken doors that separated the Hokage's office from hallway, but this time was different. He was nervous as he rapped his knuckles on the heavy door. Come in, the other side replied. Irika swallowed thickly as he pushed open the door to where his leader sat. Irika had been teaching at the academy for 6 years now. He was a veteran of dealing with the trials and tribulations of preteen ninjas with short attention spans. He did his best to bring out the best in his students and be an encouraging force in their lives. He wanted to help guide all his students to the futures that would best fit them, civilian or shinobi. He put a lot of effort and his own pride when preparing his suggestions for the team placements. He wanted to craft teams that the wisest and strongest person in the village would agree with. In situations where the Hokage had questions about his placements, he had always provided the feedback that was requested, and both shared their opinions freely about the teams with each other in friendly conversations. He hadn't always gotten his way. There had been a couple of times now the Hokage had opted not to use the teams that he suggested. The professor of shinobi had more wisdom on finger than most people in the village, and Irika knew to not take the changes as slights against his teaching. Sometimes the old Hokage just knew information that Irika couldn't or had interesting ideas about how some families could work together. This time was different, however. There had not been the usual back and forth discussion about who the students were as people. No discussion of strengths, weaknesses, or how personalities clashed and thrived between the different people. No, the Jonin Naruto had come up with the team placements, and did not include the Hokage or Irika in the process. Irika couldn't help the negative feelings that were driving him through the door right now. He was upset about that he was not aware of what was going on, and upset that his recommendations were ignored by someone with no experience. But mostly he was concerned for his students, and that drove him here. Good evening, Irika. The elderly man known as the professor was staring down at his pipe as he packed it with tobacco. There was a clearly practiced ease with how he handled the material and packed it delicately. To Irika it almost looked as if the Hokage was in a state of relaxed zen as he finished and struck a match to light the pipe.